Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Natalia Melmann. Natalia Melmann was born in Argentina in 1986 to her parents, Gustav and Lava. In 1992, the family moved to Miramar, a coastal city southwest of Buenos Aires, in search of new opportunities. After relocating, the family encountered financial difficulties due to a failed business investment. Despite these challenges, Natalia maintained a positive attitude and found ways to contribute financially. She sold newspapers, lottery tickets, and other items to help her parents and save money for a bicycle. Natalia was very close to her family and was recognized as an outstanding student. Her mother noted that Natalia woke up every day at 4 in the morning to study. This dedication resulted in her achieving top scores in nearly all her subjects, and she was frequently elected as a class monitor. Natalia aspired to become an obstetrician-gynecologist and planned to study in Cuba, hoping to return to Argentina to assist women with limited resources. This was her primary dream. Besides her studies and family time, Natalia enjoyed having fun like any young girl. She loved spending time with friends and exploring various public places in Miramar, a tourist city with many attractions. In 2001, when Natalia was 15, a tragic event occurred. On the night of February 3, she went out for a walk with friends. They first visited a bar and then went to the nightclub Amadeus. Natalia intended to talk to her ex-boyfriend at the club, but it seems things did not go well, and she left the club at 1:00 a.m. This was the last time anyone saw her. Her parents believed she was at a friend's house and waited for her to come home. However, by the afternoon of February 4, they began to worry when she still hadn't returned. Around 6:00 p.m., their concern grew, and they went to the friend's house where Natalia was supposed to be. This friend said Natalia was not with her. Natalia's parents were worried when they couldn't find any information about her. They first contacted the hospital, hoping to learn if she had been in an accident or if something else was wrong. But this inquiry yielded no results. After not hearing from friends or the hospital, they decided to report her disappearance to the police. Unfortunately, the police were not very helpful. They asked questions about Natalia's clothing, her age, whether she had a boyfriend, and if she had a violent personality. Instead of registering her as missing, they categorized her as having run away from home. The parents strongly disagreed, believing that Natalia would not have left on her own, especially since she had been acting normally before she went missing. Witnesses saw Natalia at the club talking to her ex-boyfriend Maximiliano, who was with another girl named Diana. Frustrated, Natalia decided to leave the club. Another man present that night was Gustavo Fernandez, who was older than Natalia. Several witnesses reported that he followed Natalia as she said goodbye to her friends and left the party. Gustavo was known to the police due to his criminal record. He claimed that he had come to the party as a police informant. When he was taken to the police station to give a statement, he admitted that he had seen Natalia, but maintained that he had not approached her. He said that she was walking a few meters in front of him, and that although they were walking in the same direction, he had lost sight of her when a patrol officer questioned him. After Gustavo gave his testimony, he was released, which angered Natalia's family. They felt he had more information than he revealed, but the police lacked concrete evidence to hold him. The officers who interviewed him noticed some unusual details, including scratch marks on one of his cheeks. Nonetheless, the police decided to release Gustavo. Friends, family, and volunteers joined the search for Natalia. Several photos of her were printed and volunteers went to nearby cities to hand out flyers. Unfortunately, these efforts did not lead to any significant discoveries. Several police officers joined the search and a helicopter was deployed, but no clues were found. As the days passed, Natalia's parents began to lose hope. Many people reported seeing her in various locations, some claiming that she appeared to be under the influence of drugs, while others claim to have seen her in other cities in Argentina with a young man, leading many to believe that she had run away. At that time, people were searching for her, all hoping to find her safe and well. The police assisted in these search efforts. On February 8, 2001, 4 days after she went missing, Natalia was discovered. A forester found her body under a pile of branches. The body was soon confirmed to be Natalia Melmann. Natalia's parents learned about the discovery of Natalia's body through the media. Natalia's father was in another city in Buenos Aires at the time, where he was looking for dogs to help find Natalia's body. When he heard the news, he quickly returned to Miramar. Natalia's father was with her from the time the body was found until the autopsy. He wanted a thorough investigation, but Natalia's fingernails had been cut, which was unfortunate because the DNA of potential attackers can often be found under fingernails when victims try to defend themselves. The results of the forensic examination showed that there were numerous signs of trauma, along with traces of blood on her hands and thighs. She also suffered injuries that could have been caused by a blunt object. In addition, her body had burns and her clothes were partially torn. Toxicology tests were conducted, but no drugs were found, although a very high concentration of alcohol was detected in her blood. It is important to note that when Natalia left the party and said goodbye to her friends, she did not appear to be intoxicated. Those who accompanied her insisted that she had not been drinking, which raised many questions. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation with a rope tied around her neck. The attacker left a small knot, similar to a bow, on the left side of her neck. This suggests that the killer had plenty of time. The multiple injuries on her body suggest that she had been subjected to various forms of violence, making this one of the most horrific crimes in the country's history. Biological evidence was found, including at least 5 different DNA samples that needed to be analyzed. Additionally, it was determined that she had been dead for 4 to 5 days, suggesting that Natalia likely died on the day she went missing or the day after. Police suspected Gustavo of being involved in the case. They began searching for him, but he appeared to be evading arrest. People who had seen him regularly had not seen him in recent days, suggesting that he had gotten wind of the situation and fled. While police continued to search, they obtained a search warrant for his home. There they discovered a jacket that had been washed several times, which further raised their suspicions. A luminol test found multiple bloodstains on the jacket, further confirming his guilt. They searched for him everywhere, but it was like he had vanished without a trace. The media extensively reported on the case, and Natalia's family received support from numerous people. Although there were many false leads, they also received a lot of helpful information. Just a week after the body was found, Gustavo were arrested. At first he did not want to talk, but eventually he provided evidence against 3 police officers. At the same time, the police were trying to find the location of the murder. Through tips that Natalia's family received after the case was reported in the media, they identified it as an abandoned house in the Copacabana area. The house was owned by a police officer, and there were allegations that some police officers had used it to bring young girls, drug them, and assault them. The police obtained a search warrant for the house and brought in police dogs. The dogs reacted strangely to the strong odor in the house. The police then focused on collecting evidence. They used luminol and discovered traces of blood on the washed walls, along with hair and soil samples. These samples were compared to those found on Natalia's clothing, which matched. This indicated that the soil in the house and the soil on Natalia's clothing were similar, leading the police to theorize that she likely died in that house. Gustavo then charged 3 policemen, including Oscar Alberto Echenique, Ricardo Alfredo Suarez, and Ricardo Anselmini. This brought the total number of suspects to 4, but only 1 was arrested. The only person in pretrial detention was Gustavo. The 3 remaining police officers are free pending trial, and all 4 have pleaded not guilty. Police searched their homes and cars, discovering key evidence in one of the cars. They found traces of DNA from blood that matched Natalia's, along with hair that also belonged to her. DNA samples from the car matched those from the 3 police officers. One of the DNA samples found on Natalia's body matched that of police officers Suarez, Anselmini, and Oscar Alberto. However, 2 more DNA samples were still needed to be identified, bringing the total to at least 5 different DNA samples discovered. Despite this overwhelming evidence, the only person arrested was Gustavo. A year later, in 2002, a verdict was reached. Oscar Alberto Echenique, Ricardo Alfredo Suarez, and Ricardo Anselmini were sentenced to life in prison for murder, while Gustavo Daniel Fernandez received a lighter sentence of 25 years. It is unclear whether Gustavo used violence. It is only known that he kidnapped Natalia. Gustavo's original sentence was 25 years in prison, but after a few years, his sentence was reduced to 15 years. In Natalia's case, a pubic hair found at the crime scene was sent for testing and was found to belong to Ricardo Panadero, a former police chief in Miramar. An attempt was made to bring Panadero to trial with additional evidence, which was ultimately successful. However, during Panadero's trial, the judge determined that the small DNA sample was not enough evidence to convict him, so Ricardo Panadero was acquitted. However, in 2019, Ricardo Panadero's previous acquittal was overturned, and he is currently awaiting trial. It is important to note that Panadero's DNA evidence is not the only aspect of Natalia's case. Several witnesses reported seeing Panadero in the car that abducted Natalia on the night of the incident. However, the judge chose to ignore this testimony, citing that some of the witnesses were homeless and were considered less credible. A new judge has since taken over and said he will consider all testimony and evidence. Despite their life sentences, the defendants were still given certain privileges. They could leave the prison for 2 hours every 15 days to maintain family ties and reintegrate into society. After public protests, this privilege was revoked. However, in 2017, they requested to leave again, and the court granted it. In October 2018, this privilege was revoked again, but was reinstated in December 2018. After that, the defendants were allowed to leave the prison for 12 hours every 15 days without wearing a location tracking bracelet. Notably, one of the defendants lived just a 5-minute walk from Natalia's mother's house. This allowed them to move freely around the city, spend time with their family, and visit various locations. Natalia's family has been trying to have the defendants' right to leave prison revoked. In 2021, the defendants applied for early release but were denied, despite their good behavior. It is important to note that Ricardo Panadero has been awaiting trial for 3 years, while Gustavo was released early after serving a short sentence. The case is filled with a sense of injustice, and a 5th DNA sample has yet to be found. Natalia's family is actively addressing these issues, but the process is slow. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Meng Qiji. In 2012, Meng Qiji, a Chinese citizen, enrolled at the University of Missouri, Columbia, USA, where she earned a master's degree in mechanical and aerospace engineering. One of her professors was impressed by her expertise and offered her a job at biomaterials company. While working there, Meng Qi met her future husband, Joe Elledge, in September 2015 as he was pursuing his engineering studies. They both worked at the same company, where Meng Qi was Joe's boss. Their feelings for each other grew quickly, and just a year and 7 months after their first meeting, Joe proposed to Meng Qi on September 22, 2017, on a trail at Rock Bridge Memorial State Park, called the Devil's Refrigerator. They got married only 2 weeks later. Meng Qi's parents think they rushed into marriage due to the impending expiration of Meng Qi's visa. They felt that American citizens couldn't fully grasp the difficulty that immigrants face. Although Menchi is financially independent, but she still has difficulty obtaining citizenship. After nearly 5 months, Menchi received a promotion at work. Soon after, she discovered she was pregnant. Menchi and Joe decided that she should decline the promotion and leave her job to focus entirely on motherhood, even though she was the primary breadwinner for their family at that time. Their income decreased significantly, but it was sufficient for their essential needs. In October 2018, Joe and Menchi's family gave birth to their first daughter. However, after her birth, Menchi and Joe began to face difficulties. Although their marriage appeared normal to outsiders, only Menchi's parents were aware of the reality. After quitting her job, Menchi felt completely isolated. She doesn't communicate with anyone. Her small child became her only companion, along with daily phone calls from her mother. Traditionally, Menchi's parents had to travel from China to the United States before she gave birth, to help care for and support her. They lived in a separate house nearby and visited Menchi daily, but their appearance increased tension between Menchi and her husband, Joe. On October 9, 2019, a year after Menchi's daughter was born, Menchi's parents were alarmed when they didn't receive a call from her. Unable to reach her, they sent a family friend who lived close by to check on Menchi. When the friend arrived, Joe answered the door and revealed that Menchi was missing. He shared a troubling account. On the evening of October 8, he had tried to give Menchi a massage and flirt with her, but she rejected him, saying she needed sleep because she had important plans for the next day. Joe stated that he woke up the next morning to find Menchi gone. She had left behind her car keys, mobile phone, wallet, and, most importantly, did not take their daughter with her. Despite her absence, Joe did not immediately report her missing, believing she was simply out for a walk and would return. A family friend attempted to call Menchi but was unsuccessful. Eventually, under pressure, Joe reported her disappearance to the police, but rather than calling 911, he reached out to the non-emergency number 311. Menchi's parents were unaware of this and were convinced the police were actively searching for their daughter. On October 15, 2019, a week after Menchi went missing, her husband, Joe Elledge, reported her disappearance to the Columbia, Missouri Police Department. He recounted to detectives the same information he had shared with a family friend. Joe described Menchi as appearing stressed the night before she went missing. He mentioned that she went to bed after telling him she had important matters to attend to the next morning. When he asked her 3 times who she was meeting, she did not provide clear answers. He suspected she might be having an affair and secretly meeting another man. Later that day, Joe informed investigators that he had discovered notes on Menchi's computer discussing an affair. Joe said Menchi texted a man from China. The message ended with her expressing sadness that her husband was not interested in her. Joe speculated that Menchi might have left him for this man, potentially abandoning their daughter for a new life. He expressed his love for their daughter and his desire for Menchi to return home safely. From the outset, investigators were skeptical of Joe's account and considered him a suspect. Joe's family hired a lawyer, who revealed that Menchi and the man China with had intimate and emotional conversations via text messages. The main question is whether Menchi went to see the man who lives in China, and where she is now. The police found out that Joe, upon realizing his wife was missing, did not call 911, but instead contacted 311. This made them even more suspicious of him. He willingly returned to the Columbia Police Department for further questioning. Investigators grew increasingly suspicious of his account, particularly when Joe mentioned taking long drives to find new walking spots instead of searching for his missing wife. Additionally, it was noted that Joe closed the door before leaving their apartment. It seemed like Joe didn't care how Menchi got home, especially since her phone keys were left behind. Menchi didn't drive the car. Detectives had suspicions, but they found no evidence to prove Joe was involved in his wife's disappearance, no blood, weapons, witnesses, or body. Furthermore, there was no indication that Mengqi ran away to meet another man in China. They also confirmed that Mengqi had not booked any flights. From the start, it was clear that Mengqi would never have abandoned her beloved daughter. Mengqi's parents refused to accept this hypothesis and insisted that she was a loving mother. When detectives spoke with Joe, they asked for his phone number, which he willingly provided. Inside his phone, investigators discovered something alarming: over 10 hours of secretly recorded conversations with his wife, in which Joe expressed his dissatisfaction with their marriage and his desire for a divorce. He also discussed plans to send his wife back to China. However, this discovery was minor compared to the nearly 4.5 hours of recordings found on Mengqi's phone. In these conversations, the true nature of Joe emerged. He threatened his wife, referred to himself as God, and demanded that her parents stay away from their home. It was chilling. The Joe family's issues started a few weeks before Mengqi gave birth. Her parents traveled from China to support their daughter, following a tradition where grandparents help with the baby for 100 days. This custom bothered Joe immensely, as he had a strong dislike for Mengqi's parents. What really angered Joe was that Mengqi tried to fight him back, and she said that she needed her parents. She loved them very much and needed their help taking care of the newborn. When Mengqi had just given birth, the relationship between her and her husband became very tense, and they argued a lot. Mengqi's mother mentioned that Joe disliked it when Mengqi spoke Chinese around him because he barely understood the language. Joe interpreted everything they said as hurtful and negative towards him. Eventually, when Mengqi's father could no longer tolerate the situation and returned to China, Joe felt relieved and seeing it as his personal victory. Now, he only had to manage his mother-in-law and reassert his authority in the home. Mengqi's mother made Chinese dumplings for Joe's birthday, but he didn't like the way she used the cutting board. This sparked a heated argument between Joe and her. Joe angrily demanded that she leave his house for good. Mengqi's mother, who believed in maintaining harmony because of her Confucian values, chose not to confront Joe and did not defend herself against his harsh words. Mengqi pleaded with Joe to allow her mother to stay because she needed her mother's support, but Joe only replied with insults and foul language. Joe told Mengqi was incompetent solely because she was a woman. Joe attempted to manipulate and control her. He even threatened Mengqi's mother, claiming he would harm her. This left Mengqi's mother in shock. She didn't understand why Joe was so angry with both her and Mengqi. Feeling helpless, Mengqi sought help from Joe's mother, who quickly lost her temper and drove 2 hours to address the family conflict. However, even with his mother present, Joe couldn't hide his disdain for his mother-in-law. He demanded that she kneel and bow to him. Although Joe eventually apologized to her, he still insisted that she leave before the 100-day mark. Consequently, Mengqi's mother returned to China. In October 2019, Mengqi disappeared. Detectives believed that serious family conflicts made her feel trapped, especially regarding her immigration status. Just 5 months prior, she had to attend another interview to apply for citizenship. 2 weeks after Mengqi's disappearance, the Colombia Police Department opened a criminal investigation into the case. On the same day, 16 days after she went missing, police arrested Joe Elledge on suspicion of child abuse. Joe confessed to physically abusing his 1-year-old daughter, claiming it was a form of discipline. Before Mengqi went missing, she told her mother that she had seen bruises on her daughter and suspected Joe was the cause. Her mother advised her to report Joe to the police, but Mengqi never had the opportunity to do so. Joe's lawyer claimed this was merely an attempt to get Joe imprisoned. He argued that Joe made a mistake, emphasizing that he is a young single father who might have erred. Joe was released on bail, while his mother assisted him and cared for her granddaughter. Meanwhile, detectives continued to gather evidence against Joe, convinced that he was involved in Mengqi's disappearance. On October 25, 2019, police obtained a search warrant and entered the apartment. Joe had been missing for just over 2 weeks. During the search, they collected Minchie's backpack and notes that Joe had written to help himself prepare for questions from reporters and investigators. Detectives thoroughly searched the apartment for any evidence and, following a hunch, they also took a pair of dirty boots for examination, but they found nothing significant. On the same day, Joe Elledge was arrested on suspicion of child abuse after fresh bruises were discovered on the girl's body. Meanwhile, the search for Minchie has become a search for her remains, because no one believes she is still alive. Detectives carefully tracked all movements of Joe's car and phone. However, every lead they followed led to dead ends in this complex case. As a result, the detective made the decision to charge Joe Elledge with first-degree murder, even without a body. These charges were filed while Joe was still in jail on child abuse allegations. Meanwhile, detectives continued their efforts to locate Minchie. Phone records indicated that Joe was away for 30 minutes on the day he reported her missing, a fact he did not share with investigators. When the detectives searched that location, they found nothing. After months of searching, the police were still unable to find Minchie. Her mother traveled to the United States to help with the search, convinced that her daughter's body was nearby. Over the following months, the police conducted regular searches in the area, and Minchie's mother held a memorial by the river. A year later, while Joe was still awaiting his trial, a tourist was walking in the park where Joe had proposed to Minchie. He noticed something shiny in the mud and discovered it was a wallet. Upon closer inspection, he saw a pair of shoes and then what looked like a human skull. He immediately contacted the police. Upon investigation, it was confirmed that the remains were those of Minchie. Her parents learned that their daughter had died, but the circumstances surrounding her death were still unclear. Much time had passed, and even forensic experts could not determine the cause of death. They found unnatural damage to her bones, including 4 broken ribs, indicating she had suffered a strong blow to the back. Detectives began to piece together a theory about what happened to Minchie, focusing on the evidence collected after her disappearance. They noted that Joe's cell phone records indicated he was near the location where Minchie was found on the day he reported her missing. On the day Minchie disappeared, it had been raining. Key evidence included Joe's dirty boots. The dirt and gravel on the soles, along with foliage, were sent to the Missouri Botanical Garden for analysis. The lab carefully removed juniper tree needles from the boots for DNA testing. A lab worker then climbed nearby juniper trees, numbered each, and collected fresh needles from the highest branches. These samples were preserved and compared with the needles found on Joe's shoes, revealing a DNA match. On November 1, 2021, Joe Elledge's trial for the murder of his wife, Minchie, began. With compelling evidence that Joe was present at the scene where Minchie's body was discovered on the day she went missing, including DNA from the trees and geolocation data. However, his lawyer presented a new narrative. The lawyer claimed that Joe did kill his wife, but insisted it was a tragic accident. Due to evidence from the juniper tree and its DNA, Joe could no longer assert that Minchie had run away. He had to confess that he buried her in a shallow grave. Joe stated that he was aware of his wife's communication with a man from China, and they had an argument that night. Feeling upset and hurt, he wanted to take their daughter for a walk. Minchie rushed towards him, intending to take the child, but Joe pushed her away. She fell against the table, injured her ribs, and lost consciousness. When she regained consciousness, she went to bed. In the morning, when the child started crying, Minchie did not wake up. Joe then realized she had passed away in her sleep. He claimed that his wife had attacked him first and that he was only defending himself, asserting it was self-defense. However, this explanation seemed highly questionable. Joe was twice the size of his wife, making it unlikely that she could have attacked him, and after sustaining such a severe injury, she would not have been able to get up and walk to the bed. The prosecutor argued that the evidence, particularly the 4 broken ribs, suggested Jo's account was fabricated. This injury indicated she had suffered a brutal beating. The prosecutor alleged that it was premeditated murder driven by months of escalating anger. Jo harbored hatred for his wife. In court, the prosecutor presented secret audio recordings between the couple to reveal the true dynamics of their relationship. These recordings helped clarify the motive behind the crime. No evidence of Munchie communicating with other men was ever found. On November 11, 2021, after nearly 7 hours of discussion, the jury reached a verdict. They found Jo Elledge guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Munchie and Jo's daughter currently lives with Jo's mother, but Munchie's parents are pursuing joint custody of their 4-year-old granddaughter. Jo's lawyer argues that while the child will always have a relationship with her Chinese grandparents, she should stay in the care of Jo's mother for her safety. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Bruce Pardo. In December 2008, the Ortega family invited their adult children and their families to their beautiful home in Covina, California, to celebrate Christmas. Covina is a quiet town with a low crime rate, located about 30 kilometers from Los Angeles. Joseph and Alice Ortega cherished Christmas as a time to bring their loved ones together. They had 5 children, 2 sons, Charles and James, and 3 daughters, Alicia, Letitia, and Sylvia. During this festive gathering, they engaged in their traditional poker games, enjoying laughter and joy while celebrating together. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. No one suspected that the person at the door intended to harm the Ortega family. So, they opened the door without hesitation. A few minutes later, a neighbor called 911 in a panic, yelling that the house across the street was on fire. He urgently requested firefighters to come quickly. Chaos unfolded at the scene. Firefighters were dispatched immediately to put out the flames. However, by the time they arrived, the emergency service had received several more calls from concerned neighbors. Some reported hearing gunfire, while others mentioned seeing people fleeing the house and crying for help. All available emergency crews were sent to manage the situation. Later, one of the police officers who arrived at the house described the scene as an apocalypse. Everything was on fire, and a large number of special service personnel and equipment had arrived, causing many people to rush around. Most neighbors came out of their homes, watching helplessly as firefighters worked to put out the flames at the Ortega family's house. In the midst of this chaos, they quickly located Letitia and Katrina, her 8-year-old daughter, who had managed to escape the violence. Remarkably, both survived. Initially, it was thought they had fled the fire, but the reality was much more disturbing. When the police arrived, Letitia was no longer at the house. Her daughter had been seriously injured by a gunshot and was taken to the hospital, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Letitia, a key witness, was interviewed at the hospital and shared a shocking story that disturbed the entire city. She explained that during Christmas celebrations, a man dressed as Santa Claus came to the Ortega family's home. Instead of spreading holiday cheer, he pulled out a gun and started shooting. After the attack, the man in the Santa costume set the house on fire to destroy evidence. Due to her injuries, Letitia couldn't provide further details. Neighbors backed up Letitia's account, saying that at around 2:45 a.m., they saw a strange car with a Santa Claus image driving away from a dead-end street near her home. In an effort to apprehend the shooter, police quickly began investigating who had been in the area at the time. After firefighters extinguished the fire, they found the bodies of the victims amid the rubble. In total, 9 people were killed, and their bodies were burned beyond recognition. Forensic experts later confirmed that only the hosts and their daughter had died from gunshot wounds. The other guests suffered from gunshot wounds to varying degrees, but ultimately died from smoke inhalation and fire. Some of the bodies were so badly mutilated that they could only be identified through dental records. The initial situation worsened and police discovered another victim in a pool of blood in nearby Silmar, California. Bruce Pardo was found dead by his brother, who had just returned from a Christmas party. Upon the police's arrival, they discovered 40-year-old Bruce had a single fatal gunshot wound to the head. Police initially thought Bruce ended his own life, as a 9mm pistol was found lying on his knees, with another gun lying on the floor next to him. Police confirmed that Bruce had recently finalized his divorce from Sylvia, from whom he had officially separated on December 18, 2008. Notably, Sylvia's maiden name was Arte, and she was involved in the Coven massacre. Police quickly suspected a connection between the murders. They believed that Bruce's death was staged to look like a voluntary act, implying that the real criminal wanted to conceal his involvement. It is believed that Bruce, who was allegedly the attacker, disguised as Santa Claus, ended his own life the murders. Forensic analysis revealed that each of the 9 victims had been shot at least once. All the bodies had 9mm caliber bullets, which matched the weapon found beside Bruce's body. Later, police encountered Letitia. Despite the assailant's disguise, she was able to identify him. She claimed he closely resembled Bruce Pardo. Other family members present during the shooting were shouting this as well. With her testimony, police returned to the crime scene where Bruce's body was found. They began searching Bruce's car and discovered bloody footprints. They also confirmed that neighbors had seen the same car in the bay that evening, just before it fled the scene as the fire broke out. Bruce had asked Sylvia Ortega's parents, Joseph and Alice, to arrange a family get-together on Christmas Eve. This tradition involved the entire family getting together every year to play themed games. However, the holiday made them an easy target for a mysterious attacker dressed as Santa Claus. The attacker created a terrifying nightmare. It seemed that the attacker had harbored a deep hatred for the family, leading to such a horrific act, showing no mercy even to the children. Bruce had a negative attitude toward his ex-wife, Sylvia, and her family, which fueled his actions. The fire and shooting caused the most harm to Sylvia and her parents, whom Bruce despised. He was aware of the family's annual Christmas celebration and likely planned his attack in advance. This all felt too calculated to be a coincidence. Letitia continued recounting the events of that day. The Ortega family was gathered in large numbers. Sylvia, who was divorced from Bruce at the time, was present along with her 4 siblings, some of whom brought their children. Additionally, several friends attended the party. With so many people there, no one could recall the exact number of guests. During the celebration, just before midnight, they heard the doorbell ring. Although they weren't expecting any more guests, Sylvia's 8-year-old niece, Katrina, went to the door and looked through the peephole. She spotted Santa on the other side, dressed in his familiar red and white suit and carrying a bag. Excited, she told everyone about it. The adults exchanged puzzled glances, as they hadn't arranged for any entertainers in costumes. Later, neighbors mentioned that they had seen a man in a Santa suit approaching the Ortega family's home around the same time. One neighbor waved to him and wished him a Merry Christmas. The neighbor recounted that Santa Claus stopped at the Ortega house's doorstep, rang the doorbell, and waited. The neighbor then stopped watching, assuming it was just an Ortega family celebration. However, as he closed his door, he suddenly heard gunshots and screams, prompting him to call 911. The Santa suit fooled the guests, who thought a surprise was planned for them. They did not ask who the guests were and opened the door. He brought a bag, but instead of gifts, it contained guns and a homemade flamethrower. Letitia, Katrina's mother, grabbed a video camera to capture the festive moment. At that moment, Letitia heard applause. Her daughter Katrina ran toward Santa, who stood at the door with a large red bag. However, instead of presents, he pulled out a gun and aimed it at the child's face. Santa shot Katrina before anyone could react. Following that, he began firing at everyone in his path. Chaos erupted in the house as he ran out of bullets. He quickly retrieved a second gun with a full magazine. The assailant showed no mercy, even targeting children. In the ensuing panic, parents and two sisters sought refuge under the dining table. The attacker clearly saw his victims and shot them at close range, firing multiple shots at each, mostly in the back and head. Santa moved among them, continuing to shoot at the defenseless. He went through the rooms of the house, checking and shooting everyone he saw. One of the bullets hit Sylvia's brother, James. Her other brother, Charles, screamed that he recognized the shooter. He barely had time to say Bruce Pardo's name before several gunshots rang out, and he was silenced forever. After moving through the house and leaving a trail of blood, Santa decided to destroy the evidence of his crime. He pulled a homemade flamethrower from his gift bag and began spraying fuel on the victims and surrounding furniture. Immediately, the entire first floor was engulfed in flames. Letitia said that the Santa suit caught fire and the attacker to flee the scene. This gave Letitia the opportunity to reach her daughter and take her to safety, but she was unable to save anyone else. Her child suffered serious head injuries, prompting a neighbor to quickly call emergency services. A 16-year-old boy and two other guests, along with everyone in the living room within sight of the attacker, were injured or killed. The survivors could only watch helplessly as the house burned, especially when a gas cylinder exploded inside. Firefighters arrived shortly after to extinguish the fire, with nearly 80 people on the scene. Despite their efforts, it took them an hour and a half to bring the fire under control. Police were initially skeptical, but a thorough investigation of the crime scene and autopsy confirmed that Bruce had indeed ended his own life, as no one else was in the house when he pulled the trigger. He also suffered severe third-degree burns to his arms and legs. Letitia mentioned that his Santa suit had caught fire during the incident, raising doubts about whether Bruce was actually responsible for the crime. It was clear to everyone that Bruce and Sylvia met through a mutual friend at work. At the time, Sylvia was divorced and had 3 children from her previous marriage. She and Bruce quickly connected and started dating. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and by December 2006, they decided to get married. Following their wedding, they bought a lovely house to accommodate their growing family. Bruce had a stable job as an electrical engineer at a large local company and also volunteered at the local Catholic church. Generally, people viewed him as a positive and helpful person, always willing to assist others in difficult situations, unless the conversation turned to money. Bruce always aimed to become wealthy. He worked hard, which allowed him to buy a boat and several cars over time. With their good income, he and his wife were able to purchase an expensive house with a mortgage, making their first payment together. However, since the house was located in a high-end area, their relationship began to suffer. By 2007, Sylvia started to voice her frustrations more often, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibilities she had to shoulder. She worked and earned a good salary while also raising 3 children, whom Bruce did not help with. Despite this, he took on most of the financial responsibilities for repaying the mortgage. Sylvia felt that Bruce did not contribute enough to their common goals. Despite this, she still took care of his dog. They had a joint savings account, but she believed that she did more to support them financially. Conflict arose over money because Bruce was stingy, which frustrated Sylvia. They had originally agreed that Sylvia would support her 3 children from a previous relationship, so Bruce refused to spend money on them. At first, their family life was relatively stable, But Bruce's greed soon began to annoy Sylvia. She expected their savings to total around $88,000. In 2007, when she checked the account, she discovered that Bruce had transferred all their savings to his personal account, leaving only $9,000. This incident significantly strained their marriage. Later, Sylvia learned that Bruce had been unfaithful throughout their marriage. From the beginning, he insisted he didn't want children and denied being a father until Sylvia found out from his mother that he had a child. Bruce had a normal childhood. His school years were normal and free of negative influences. He was quite intelligent. As a result, he entered California State University, Northridge. After completing his studies, he took a job as an electrical engineer at a large research company. Bruce excelled in his profession, which brought him recognition and rapid advancement in his career. However, this was not enough for him. Bruce became focused on the earnings of his colleagues and developed jealousy whenever someone made more money than he did. To cope with this, he started claiming more working hours than he actually worked. Those who knew him well described this behavior as an obsession with money. This obsession ultimately resulted in his dismissal when the deceit was discovered. Relatives noted that Bruce struggled with relationships with women. Although he was attractive and dated many, these relationships often ended abruptly. Financial problems were a constant issue in his life. Bruce started dating a colleague named Dea, and they both seemed serious about their relationship, even planning a wedding together. However, financial concerns became a point of contention. Despite having a good income and some savings, Bruce was unwilling to spend money on a lavish wedding, considering it a waste. He preferred a simpler celebration, but Dea, who was set on having a grand wedding, chose to pay for the extravagant event she had always wanted. Dea took care of all the arrangements for the ceremony and paid for everything herself. However, Bruce was absent. He had backed out of the wedding, running away with $3,000 from their joint account, which they had been saving for their honeymoon. Instead of marrying Dea, he went to Palm Springs by himself and spent all the money on his own enjoyment. This decision also ended his relationship with Dea. In the following years, Bruce dated several women. But his greed led to the failure of those relationships as well. Friends noted that he was consistently the cause of the breakups, as none of his relationships lasted long due to his obsession with money. This continued until Bruce turned 30. During this time, he met Elena Luca, and they eventually married and had a son named Matthew in 2001. Tragically, when Matthew was only 1 year old, an accident occurred. While Elena went to the store for a while, Matthew was in Bruce's care. But Matthew fell into the pool in their yard. When Elena returned, she found Bruce and their son not breathing. It is unclear why Bruce did not call for help or attempt to resuscitate Matthew. Elena quickly called 911. Although doctors were able to revive Matthew, he suffered severe, irreversible brain damage that left him partially paralyzed for the rest of his life. Bruce's erratic behavior led Elena to suspect that he wanted to abandon their child, whom he seemed to find uninteresting. Bruce then chose to leave Elena and their disabled child, without providing any financial support. This left Elena in a difficult situation, as she was not working and in dire need of help. Despite her constant requests and innuendos, Bruce chose to ignore her, avoiding all contact with Matthew and ignoring Elena's pleas. By the time of the tragic events, the medical bills had exceeded $35,000, and with no payment agreement in place, Elena turned to the court for help. She was later awarded a monthly payment of $240, but the amount was not enough to care for a disabled child. When Sylvia discovered his past actions, she chose to end their marriage. She was outraged by Bruce's lack of concern for their son, which made it impossible for her to stay with him. Consequently, she filed for divorce. The court ordered Bruce to pay Sylvia a one-time settlement of $10,000, which was significantly less than what he had withdrawn from their joint account. Additionally, he was required to pay monthly alimony. Sylvia also retained her engagement ring and the dog they had adopted during their marriage. The division of their real estate was still being decided in court. Bruce's ideal life began to crumble. Not only did he go through a costly divorce, but he also lost his job, which made his financial situation worse. Accustomed to a high standard of living, he could no longer maintain his previous lifestyle. They believed that during this trying time, Bruce hatched a sinister plan for revenge. Just before Christmas, Bruce purchased 2 handguns, an air compressor, a high-octane flamethrower, and a custom-made Santa Claus suit. He used these items in the murders of the Ortega family on December 24th. After the murders, Bruce contacted the police to report a vehicle parked in front of his Pasadena home. When the license plate was checked, police discovered that the Dodge Caliber had been rented by Bruce Pardo. The vehicle was equipped for long-distance travel, with everything needed for an escape, including a laptop, several sets of clothes, food, and maps of both Mexico and the United States. It is possible that Bruce had planned to flee the country after the murder, but then changed his plans. In the trunk of his car, police discovered 4 pistols with 13-round magazines and about 200 rounds of ammunition. As a result of these events, a tragic array of consequences ensued. 13 children were left without parents. The massacre could have been much worse had the children been present at the Christmas gathering. Following the attack, custody of the surviving children was granted to their uninjured family members. One of the hardest-hit victims was a girl named Katrina, who was shot in the head while greeting Santa Claus at the entrance of the house. Surgeons fought to save her life, and miraculously, they succeeded. However, she endured a long and difficult recovery thereafter. Toxicology tests revealed that Bruce Pardo was under the influence of illegal substances during the attack, which amplified his violent behavior. It also emerged that he had booked a flight for Christmas morning. Given his chaotic mental state, he frequently changed his plans. Just half an hour after the massacre, he purchased a ticket to Canada. His intention may have been to flee. Police later discovered that Bruce had intended to stop in Minnesota, where a close friend lived. In the days before the murders, he had called the friend to express his plans to visit. However, it is still unclear whether Bruce actually intended to make the visit or if it was just a hoax to fool the police. The police also discovered that Bruce may have been plotting to kill his biological mother, as she was the one who informed Sylvia about Bruce's disabled child. In addition, his mother still maintained a close relationship with Sylvia and the entire Ortega family. She was supposed to be at the Christmas party, but she was sick that day so could not attend, so she escaped death. Despite his controversial nature, those who knew Bruce had never previously witnessed aggression from him. He was typically calm and balanced, albeit greedy and cunning. Police theorized that a tumultuous divorce, financial worries, job loss, and an obsession with money pushed Bruce onto the path of crime. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Chiara Poggi. Chiara Poggi was born in Vigai, Italy, on March 31, 1981. She studied economics and landed a job as a financier at a large company. She was a delicate girl with expressive blue eyes. She was determined to advance her career and become a manager, with the ultimate goal of starting her own business. To achieve this, she focused on her studies and graduated. Alongside her professional ambitions, Chiara also wanted to start a family. At that time, she had been in a relationship with a man named Alberto for 7 years. Unfortunately, all her dreams seemed to stop there, as fate had other plans for her. On August 13, 2007, at approximately 9:12 a.m., Chiara was going about her daily routine when someone knocked on her door. She opened it, unaware that this decision would lead to her death just a few hours later. At 1:50 p.m., Alberto called the Italian emergency services, 118, to report a tragedy at his girlfriend's home. Alberto had discovered Chiara's body. He explained that he had visited and found her lying in a pool of blood. When the dispatcher asked if he could help the victim, Alberto said he couldn't bear to look at the scene and had already left to contact the police. He provided the address and implied that his girlfriend was already dead when he called. When asked why he did not wait for the police at the scene, the Alberto explained that the house was located on a dead-end street, making it hard for the police to find. He decided to go to the police himself and bring them to the tragedy scene to prevent confusion. The Carabinieri arrived after being directed by the emergency services dispatcher. All the doors of the house were locked, so the officers had to climb over the fence. Once inside the kitchen, they discovered signs of a struggle. The Chiara seemed to have been attacked while cooking. Dishes were scattered, and there were open boxes containing a knitting needle, which suggested a confrontation might have taken place. The police also found initial evidence of a violent crime. There were drops of blood on the floor. And in the room near the exit, they discovered a potholder and white slippers that were later confirmed to belong to the Chiara. The Carabinieri entered the next room and discovered Chiara lying face down on the steps near the basement entrance. She appeared to have been taken by surprise, as she was still wearing her pink summer pajamas. Chiara showed signs of a severe beating. It seemed she had been struck multiple times with a heavy object, likely a hammer. The police officers quickly spotted important evidence in the pool of blood, a strand of hair that obviously did not belong to Chiara and a distinctive shoe print left in the dried blood. The lack of warmth in the Chiara's body suggested that she had been killed a few hours earlier. The police quickly contacted Chiara's parents. Rita, the mother, was on vacation in Trentino and had missed the call. She called back around 3:30 p.m. and was so distraught by the news that she nearly fainted. She rushed back to the city. When Rita arrived at the police station, her husband, Giuseppe, Chiara's father, was there. Nicola Stasi, Alberto's father, was also there when his son was brought to the station. Alberto called his father for support. Alberto, 20, shared his story of events with the police by the time Chiara's parents arrived. Alberto said he called Chiara at 9:45 a.m., but she did not answer. He was not concerned at first, thinking she might still be asleep. After noon, he made several attempts to contact her on both her cell phone and her home phone, but received no response. At 11:15 a.m., he decided to go play golf. After returning from his match at around 12:30 p.m., Alberto found all of Chiara's doors locked and she was not answering his phone calls. Worried, he climbed over the fence and tried to open the door, but it was locked. He then broke in through the kitchen window, the only way into the house. Inside, he found the TV on. At first, he thought Chiara might still be asleep in her room. However, when he could not find her, he went into the kitchen and saw drops of blood on the dishes. He then went into the living room, where he discovered her body, leaving him in shock. It's strange that he didn't approach Chiara to check on her or try to help. Instead, he ran to get the investigator. At that moment, she was still alive, and she might have been saved. Rather than ensuring his girlfriend was okay or providing first aid, he left the house and headed to the police station. Once in the car, he called for an ambulance. During the police interrogation, they noticed his odd behavior and questioned why he didn't check if the girl was breathing. Instead of helping her, he just ran away and called the police. Alberto explained that he was scared and confused, which led him to call for help right away. However, he could have stayed, called for medics, and waited for the ambulance while performing CPR. He claimed he left because he felt unsafe in the house after the attack and sought protection from police. The Alberto spent the entire day at the police station and around midnight. He was getting ready to meet with the police again to answer their questions. Meanwhile, forensic experts were carefully examining the crime scene and were puzzled by a footprint found in a pool of the Chiara's blood. They asked Alberto to show them his shoes. He was wearing special white golf shoes that were spotless. He claimed he had been wearing them when he arrived at his girlfriend's house. However, this raised suspicions because the floor around the body was covered in blood. How could someone walk around in such a bloody scene without getting any blood on their shoes? There wasn't a single drop of blood on the soles, and the Alberto couldn't provide a clear explanation for this. The police decided to question Alberto about his relationship with Chiara, the murdered girl. Alberto described their relationship as wonderful, claiming they had very few problems. Like any couple, they occasionally argued, but these conflicts were minor and quickly resolved. The police then asked him for more details about the events leading up to her death to help establish a timeline and identify any suspicious activity. However, Alberto offered no significant information. The police took his fingerprints and ultimately released him due to a lack of evidence, keeping him at the police station for just under a day. Finally, around 7 a.m., Alberto got into his father's car and went home. On August 17th, when police examined the search history and files on Alberto's computer, he claimed he woke up early that morning, around 9 a.m., and was working on his thesis while trying to call his girlfriend, after which he went to play golf. Evidence confirmed that he was home, fed his dog, and then left the house. Although it seemed that Alberto had an alibi, the police remained suspicious. The police continued their investigation to reconstruct the timeline of the attack. They were particularly focused on how the crime occurred and still needed to identify the murder weapon. Based on the condition of the Chiara's body, it appeared the attacker used a metal object, possibly something like a hammer with a pointed end or an ice pick. At that point, the forensic report indicated that Chiara was likely murdered between 9 and 10 in the morning. When the police examined the prime Alberto's mobile phone records, they discovered that his mother called him daily just before 10 a.m. Elizabeth, the mother, confirmed that she spoke to her son that day to check on a friend, seemingly validating his alibi and suggesting he could not have committed the murder during that time. However, upon further investigation of the call logs, the police found that the mother did not call her son that day, raising suspicions. Alberto's motives are unclear. Friends confirmed that Chiara and Alberto had a wonderful relationship, with only minor disagreements that are typical of any young couple. A friend named Marco saw Alberto the day after the tragic event and noticed that Alberto seemed distressed. He refused to eat and spoke very little, often expressing his deep sadness over Chiara's death. Meanwhile, the investigation was progressing. The police had gathered preliminary investigation materials, autopsy reports, and numerous witness testimonies about the couple. After August 20th, forensic experts continued analyzing the evidence, including hair found in a pool of blood that did not belong to the Chiara. They also examined materials collected from under Chiara's fingernails. Additionally, several blood splatters were discovered in the house that did not seem to match Chiara's, suggesting they might belong to the assailant. On the morning of August 22nd, Alberto visited the police station to obtain some documents. He spent a few hours speaking with the police, who were hoping to gather new information from him. Additionally, at 2 p.m., Alberto was scheduled to take part in an interrogation with the prosecutor present. With police showing increased interest, the Alberto was preparing for his meeting with his lawyer. By this time, Alberto had already spent over 26 hours at the station, providing the police with all the information they requested. He repeated his account of the events from August 13th. But the police were more focused on the evening of the 12th, the night before the bloody massacre took place. That night, the couple ordered 2 pizzas from a nearby restaurant and spent the evening eating and watching TV. Alberto then went home. Police scrutinized every detail of his statement for any inconsistencies, especially questioning why Alberto left after dinner. Throughout the investigation, Alberto repeatedly maintained that he had nothing to do with his girlfriend Chiara's death. The prosecution remained skeptical. He questions why there was no blood on Alberto's white sneakers as he moved around the house. Was he really that cautious? Why did Alberto leave on the night of the 12th instead of staying with Chiara? And why did he not help her when he found her unconscious? Unexpectedly, Chiara's neighbor provided some information. At around 9 a.m., she noticed a bicycle parked near the entrance to Chiara's house. As a cyclist, she found this strange, as she had never seen Chiara or Alberto riding such a bicycle. Later, the bicycle was spotted near Chiara's fence. The neighbor, who was knowledgeable about bicycles, realized that it was a women's model equipped with unusual accessories not usually found on regular bicycles. The woman did not think about what would happen next. She looked out her window around 10 o'clock or 10:30 a.m. and noticed that the vehicle was no longer by the neighbor's fence. This information caught the police's attention, as it might be an important clue. The police realized that finding this bike could significantly advance their investigation, as locating the owner might lead them to the killer. However, their search for this type of bike hit a dead end because the description provided was too vague. Later, another neighbor, a 47-year-old woman, contacted the police. She reported seeing a bike near Chiara's house at 9:30 a.m. and confirmed it was a women's model with a new color, although some details did not match. It's possible that one of the neighbors had remembered those details incorrectly. Meanwhile, over several days, several lawyers defended Alberto, including his brothers, Giulio and Giuseppe Colli, who worked in the Vai Giovanna Bar Association. However, by this time, the police had discovered the complicated love story between Chiara and Alberto. The love between the Chiara and Alberto was genuine, and their relationship was going well. This was evident to those who knew them and was reflected in their frequent exchanges of affectionate messages. They hardly ever argued, and when they did, the disagreements were minor and quickly resolved. However, in the week leading up to the incident, some unusual changes were observed in their relationship. It seems that Chiara has recently stopped wanting to see Alberto, and they have started sleeping in separate rooms even when he stays overnight. Alberto attributes this behavior to the fact that he prefers to sleep in a double bed in Chiara's brother's room, where he finds it more comfortable. There were very few photographs of the couple together, raising concerns about their relationship. Instead, the Alberto's secret folder contained hundreds of photos of women's feet in shoes, leading to suspicions that the couple's seemingly happy exterior was hiding deeper issues. This raised the question, could Alberto's unusual fetish have been connected to the murder? The case took a dramatic turn 43 days after Chiara's death, when police discovered Alberto's sister's bicycle, matching a neighbor's description. Blood was found on the pedals, which was later confirmed through laboratory testing to be Chiara's. However, Alberto's sister had a solid alibi, as she was at work at the time of the incident. Initially, Alberto was believed to have borrowed his sister's bicycle. The family and the community were shocked. They did not believe Chiara's boyfriend was guilty until the very end. However, when traces of her DNA were found on the pedals of the bike, they had no choice but to accept his guilt. Relatives were also shocked by Alberto's behavior. He met with them several times after the tragedy and still steadfastly maintained his innocence. The parents displayed clear signs of their grief. The lawyer passionately defended his client, trying to explain the presence of the Chiara's blood on the pedals, despite the significant amount found, which was not just a few drops. The defense attempted to dismiss this evidence by suggesting it could be related to menstruation and other implausible theories. Ultimately, despite these efforts, Alberto was arrested. On September 28, the judge reviewed the case file and determined that there was not enough evidence against the suspect, leading to Alberto's immediate release from prison. The case file was then sent back to the prosecution for further examination. Police had found a significant amount of specific pornographic material on the Alberto's computer. They believed that his girlfriend might have discovered his secret fetish, which could have caused tension between them. A conflict arose, and this seems plausible considering that on August 12th, the day before the incident, the Alberto had been working on his laptop at Chiara's place and had left it there, giving her access to the stored information. Alberto had many photographs of women's shoes that he seemed to have taken himself, particularly during a recent trip to London shortly before his relationship with Chiara started to decline. Additionally, there were images capturing private moments between the Chiara and Alberto. These photos were blurred, but the girl appeared to be quite embarrassed in them. It's possible that the Alberto's specific preferences in intimacy contributed to their disagreements. Alberto acknowledged that he has certain fetishes, but he claimed that the Chiara always accepted, and it never caused any issues between them. On November 3, 2008, Alberto was charged once more. Police believed they had sufficient evidence to link him to Chiara's murder. It was clear that the Alberto knew the victim well, as he had unrestricted access to her home. This was supported by the fact that nothing was broken or stolen, and the Chiara was found wearing her home clothes. The strongest evidence was a footprint found in the Chiara's blood. It was a size 42 shoe print that matched the Alberto's foot size. After committing the crime, Alberto replaced his old shoes with a brand new pair that he wore during his first interrogation. Despite blood prints being found on the bicycle pedals, he persisted in denying any involvement. It seems he successfully disposed of the sneakers he wore when he left the Chiara's house after the murder. On February 24, 2009, during the preliminary hearing, the prosecution requested a 30-year prison sentence. Although they had initially requested a life sentence, after reviewing the case documents, the judge determined that further improvements were needed. He identified many of the evidence as being implausible. Extensive research was conducted, including a reconstruction of the events using computer models. A comprehensive model of Chiara's house was built, allowing the police to track the killer's movements. On August 13, 2009, a detailed report was submitted to the court. According to this report, the Alberto turned on his computer at 9:35 a.m. and viewed several pornographic photographs. He continued this activity until 12:20 p.m. and identified only 3 possible time intervals during which the murder could have occurred. The house alarm was deactivated at 9:12 a.m., and there is no information about Alberto's activities between then and 9:35 a.m. The second time window for the murder was from 12:20 p.m. to 12:46 p.m., as the Alberto called Chiara's mobile phone from his home shortly after 12:46 p.m. There was also a time frame available for the murder from 12:46 p.m. to 1:26 p.m. The forensic expert determined that the Chiara likely died between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock in the morning, suggesting that the earlier time frame was more plausible. Meanwhile, the defense pointed out several mistakes made by the police during the investigation. The forensic expert noted that evidence was mishandled. There were numerous errors and inconsistencies, including the failure to collect the Chiara's fingerprints. Police also did not investigate other people who may have used the bicycle seen near Chiara's house, which weakened the prosecution's case. Additionally, the provisional time frame established suggests that Alberto had no more than 23 minutes to commit the crime, set up the scene, escape, and dispose of the shoes. Alberto lived a mile from Chiara's house, and if he had been able to ride his bicycle to Chiara's house, it would have been physically difficult and inconsistent with the timeline of events. Despite this, the prosecution believed he could have done so. On December 17th, the judge left the courtroom to consider his verdict. The prosecution asked for a 30-year prison sentence. However, they failed to present convincing evidence of his guilt. There were no bloody shoes, video footage, witness testimony, or obvious motives linking Alberto to the murder. Ultimately, the judge found Alberto not guilty. The verdict shocked the local community, which had expected a different outcome and labeled Alberto a murderer. However, the case did not end there. Chiara's family filed an appeal on November 8, 2011, leading to a new trial. This hearing lasted several weeks, during which the public and media were barred from the courtroom, allowing journalists only to enter when the decision was announced. The court acquitted the Alberto Stasi once more during a retrial on April 18, 2013. The lawyer emphasized that the charges lacked grounding and that there was insufficient evidence. He also argued that it would have been impossible for Alberto to commit the murder and cover up the evidence in just 23 minutes. Following the death of Alberto's father, who was killed in a Pavia hospital on April 9, 2014, a new phase in the investigation began. This phase included various pieces of evidence, such as computer modeling and a thorough analysis of a bicycle found in the Alberto's home. Unexpectedly, during this investigation, Alberto confessed to murdering Chiara. The case was so complex that without this confession, he likely would have been acquitted again. However, under public pressure, he ultimately admitted his guilt. On December 17, 2014, 37-year-old Alberto Stasi received a 16-year prison sentence and was ordered to pay €1 million in compensation to the Chiara's family. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Amber Dubois and Chelsea King. Amber Dubois had just celebrated her 14th birthday. She was born in December, and both of her parents cherished her. In 1999, her parents separated, and she chose to live with her mother. However, she maintained regular contact with her father, Morris, and visited him later on. Her mother married Dave Cave, and together they had another daughter named Allison. The mother and her daughters shared a strong bond. Amber had a good relationship with her stepfather, whom she regarded as a second father, and he affectionately referred to her as his daughter. They all lived together in Dave's house as a tight-knit family. Amber was a girl who loved reading and writing stories. She eagerly consumed books and was not interested in the typical activities that girls her age usually enjoyed. She didn't care for shopping for makeup and clothes, and boys held no appeal for her at that time. Instead, she was passionate about studying. Amber frequently attended extra classes at school because she had set herself a challenging goal to master the curriculum ahead of schedule, and she was well ahead of her classmates. Her greatest passion was animals. She nurtured this love in many ways, from reading books to visiting various zoos and exhibitions. She adored all creatures, from insects to elephants, regardless of their appearance or size. Amber wrote detailed accounts of her experiences with these animals in her diary. This passion evolved from a hobby into a dream of becoming a marine biologist, focusing on animal behavior. Amidst this, she was excited about the opportunity to join a school program called Farmers of the Future, where students could acquire a farm animal. Amber was eager to buy a lamb. Amber's mother and stepfather were not very wealthy, but she strongly urged them to support her project financially. Although they were hesitant at first, they eventually agreed under her persuasion and gave her about $200 for a lamb. However, they wanted to make sure Amber understood the responsibilities that came with this decision. Her mother suggested Amber write a sort of business plan outlining the steps to achieve her goal. Amber wrote a thorough letter that spanned over 2 pages. Recognizing her understanding of the project, her mother agreed to help her carry out the plan. The Amber was excitedly awaiting the day she could pick up her little lamb, whom she had named Lynette. On Friday, February 13, 2009, Amber woke up and prepared for school, packing a receipt for the lamb in her backpack. She walked to school every day, taking a short 10-minute route. However, that day, she did not return home as expected. Her stepfather was the first to notice. Initially, Dave thought she might be spending time with animals or had already gone to pick up her lamb and simply lost track of time. He searched the area around their home but couldn't find her and called out her name, receiving no response. Concerned, he contacted the farmer from whom Amber was supposed to buy the lamb. But the farmer informed him that she had not visited. Next, he called his wife to tell her what had happened. In a state of panic, she quickly called her daughter but received no response. The mother then asked Dave to check both the club and the school for their daughter. He got into his car and drove to the club first, but the staff there informed him that they hadn't seen Amber. Next, he went to her high school, hoping she might still be there, perhaps staying late to take care of her animal or to work on a project. However, when he spoke to the girl's teacher, he was met with a shocking revelation. The teacher informed him that Amber had not attended school that day. Suddenly, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath him, and his panic escalated, especially when her mother learned about her daughter's absence from school. Amber was an outstanding student, diligent, intelligent, and humble. She worked hard every day to achieve her goal of finishing school early. Under no circumstances could she skip school voluntarily, which led her mother to worry about the worst possible scenarios. On that particular day, Amber was also excited because she was finally going to get her own lamb, a dream she had cherished for a long time. Despite their fears, they held on to hope that she would be found soon. Amber's mother immediately called the police to report her missing. She cried on the phone, pleading with them to start the search for her daughter right away, and they quickly launched an investigation. Meanwhile, her mother took time off work and hurried home to search for Amber. She also informed Amber's biological father, who joined the search as well. Police officers arrived at their home and spoke with Amber's Dave and mother. They described Amber as a shy, home-loving girl who was focused on her studies and loved animals. They emphasized that she was not a troublemaker and had very few friends, making it unlikely that she had run away. Police examined Amber's belongings and concluded that she had not escaped from home. All her possessions and money were left behind, so the police decided to visit her school. They followed the route Amber took daily for many years, hoping to find clues about her whereabouts. It was suspected that she might have been meeting someone before she vanished, but they found no evidence along the way. The police then spoke to the Amber's classmates, who confirmed that she was very focused on her studies and rarely interacted with anyone. She didn't go to parties or have friends or a boyfriend, making it difficult for them to understand where she could have gone. The police also reviewed Amber's online searches and contacts, suspecting she might have engaged with a dangerous person who could have lured her into a trap. However, her search history only included harmless queries about animals, with nothing that raised any red flags. In a desperate effort to find the missing person, police sought help from the public, hoping to receive useful clues. They distributed posters and flyers with Amber's picture. With the help of many city residents, police received valuable information. Several witnesses reported seeing a girl resembling Amber on the morning of February 13th, walking alone on her way to school. One witness noted that she was wearing a sweatshirt because of the cool, light rain that morning. Soon after, another witness came forward. A family friend had driven her daughter to school, and her children were friends. At that time, she saw Amber walking and talking to a boy she did not recognize. The woman chose not to interrupt their conversation and continued driving. She described the boy as having dark skin and a round face, but she could not see him clearly. This was the only clue the police had. They focused on this information to try to identify the boy, but none of Amber's classmates could identify him. They then deployed bloodhounds to follow Amber's scent, leading the search party to Escato High School and along the highway to the remote Pala Indian Reservation. After the scent trail ended, the mother insisted that they had never been to the area and that Amber would not have gone there on her own, raising suspicions that someone had deliberately brought her to that location. News of Amber's disappearance quickly spread throughout the community and attracted significant media attention. This prompted many volunteers to form search parties and visit police stations to offer help. Eventually, the FBI became involved in the investigation. Agents first focused on known criminals in the area with a history of violent sex crimes, conducting over 500 interviews. Unfortunately, this effort did not yield any useful information. Police also re-examined Amber's home using luminol to look for blood, but found no signs of a struggle. They also reviewed all available surveillance footage along Amber's route, but although she appeared on several cameras, none captured the moment she disappeared. Time passed, and the police still had no valuable leads. Search teams could not find any clues. From all the information gathered, the police could only identify one suspect, Dave. This suspicion arose from the beginning of the investigation. His story seemed fabricated. The police closely examined the family and found an atmosphere of love and understanding. However, Dave had problems with his teenage stepdaughter, Amber. He felt that she should spend more time with the family, while she preferred to focus on her studies, participate in club activities, and spend time alone at home. Dave provided a confusing account of his activities on that fateful Friday. He claimed he didn't go to work, which was unusual for him. Instead, he attended a personal training session, returned home, and then left again. His inconsistent statements raised suspicion with the police. He also visited his wife at her workplace to give her chocolate-covered strawberries as a Valentine's Day gift, an unexpected gesture since it was the first time he had done something like that in their relationship. Additionally, he did not check the answering machine when he got home, which was unlike him. It seemed that Dave was preoccupied with something else, a fact that his wife noticed, remarking that his behavior that day was out of character. The police conducted a detailed investigation into the suspect's identity, but found no incriminating evidence. Eventually, they invited him to the station for several tests, including a lie detector test, which he accepted. Dave was asked to remove his shirt for an examination for scratches, but none were found. Furthermore, he passed 8 polygraph tests. As a result, Dave was ruled out as a suspect. Months passed without any news of Amber. Her mother could not shake the fear that Dave might be involved in Amber's disappearance. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, she packed her belongings, took her 7-year-old daughter, Allison, and left Dave. Worried about Allison's safety, she took an extended leave from work and kept a close watch on her daughter. The mother felt lost and hopeless. She hoped that Amber was still alive, but deep down, she knew that the chances were slim. In her desperation, she considered hiring a private investigator, using a dog, and even consulting a psychic to find clues about her daughter. The grief overwhelmed her, and without thinking it through, she suddenly left for Mexico with Allison after a stranger claimed to have seen Amber there. The mother traveled around the city handing out flyers and interviewing people to raise awareness about her missing daughter. Amber's biological father, Morris, was also determined to find her. He quit his job and spent all his savings on the search. The situation took a toll on him, but he persevered. The public response to Amber's disappearance was huge, leading to numerous newspaper articles and several films being made about her case. The entire country was shocked by Amber's disappearance. The number of witnesses contacting the police with various pieces of information increased, but none of this information was helpful to the investigation or provided valuable leads. On February 13, 2010, Amber's family held a fundraising event at a high school to support the ongoing search efforts, which they desperately needed. During the event, police representatives announced that there had been no progress in the investigation and that Amber was still missing. The community rallied around Amber's mother, expressing outrage that the perpetrator was still at large. On February 25, 2010, an unexpected event occurred when 17-year-old Chelsea King disappeared from Po, a town just a 10-minute drive from Esca. Born in 1992, Chelsea had a younger brother named Tyler and was known for her intelligence, strong academic performance, and love for animals. She aspired to attend college and had already received several invitations, with teachers predicting a bright future for her in the sciences. Chelsea was also an avid runner and was out for a cross-country training run on the morning of her disappearance. However, she never returned home. By midday, her family realized she was missing and couldn't reach her by phone. What worried them most was not just her absence, but that she was ignoring their calls and messages, something she had never done before. Concerned for Chelsea's safety, Chelsea's relatives contacted the police, prompting a large-scale search for her. Police learned from the parents of the Chelsea that she had left home and driven to Burn Ranch Park in San Diego, a well-known spot for walking and recreation. While heading to the park to search for her, Chelsea's parents communicated with the police and provided a statement at the scene. They located their daughter's car parked in the lot, with her phone ringing inside, but Chelsea was missing. Following these developments, many volunteers joined the search efforts. In a wooded area, the Chelsea's socks and underwear were discovered discarded along a path about 3 kilometers from her car. This raised suspicions that a new victim of abduction may have experienced sexual abuse. There had been no news about Amber until her parents learned of this new case. Immediately, they traveled to the park where the incident occurred to assist in the search. Amber's parents believed these cases were related and felt it was their responsibility to support Chelsea's family. They aimed to collaborate in the effort to capture the dangerous criminal threatening the girls. Specially trained dogs participated in the operation, tracking a trail that led to Lake Hodges, situated near the park. This location became the focus of their search efforts. Soon after, they discovered additional items of clothing belonging to the athlete, specifically her sports top and one sneaker. As the search progressed, police reviewed the timeline of events and the most recent crime reports concerning the disappearances of girls. They were already aware of Amber's disappearance and sought out similar cases of attacks in the area from the past few years. A few months before Chelsea disappeared, a stranger attacked another girl who was jogging. This incident occurred on December 22, 2009, involving 22-year-old Candice Mancao, who was running on her usual route near where Chelsea's clothes were later found. During her jog, a stranger suddenly grabbed Candice and threw her to the ground, trying to overpower her. She quickly realized that he intended to rape her. Candice fought back and screamed for help. After this, Candice managed to escape and struck the assailant in the nose with her elbow. The attacker screamed in pain and covered his face, giving her a few seconds to get away. The Candice immediately called the police to report the attempted rape. At that time, the investigation into Candice's case was still ongoing, but police lacked any leads. The police revisited the description of the rapist provided by the survivor. He appeared to be between 23 and 26 years old, fair-skinned with dark hair, and of large build. Meanwhile, the police received analysis results from Chelsea's belongings, which had been found in a wooded area. These results led to a significant breakthrough in the investigation. 2 different DNA profiles were identified on the clothing. The first matched Chelsea, but the second did not belong to her. This DNA profile was quickly entered into the police database, and forensic scientists soon made a 100% match. The DNA was linked to John Albert Gardner, known criminal with a history of sexual violence. Given this connection, police immediately began searching for him in relation to Chelsea's case. The John lived near Bernard's Ranch at the time of his arrest on February 28, 2010. He was 31 years old. Police first examined the John's properties. He owned and rented a significant amount of real estate, but they found no evidence of the Chelsea in any of these locations. After his arrest, the John requested a lawyer and refused to speak with police, which shortchanged the police of valuable time. Despite this setback, there was still hope that Chelsea was alive. the team began to closely analyze the John's profile to determine where he might have taken Chelsea after the kidnapping. John Albert Gardner was born in 1979 in California. He had a challenging childhood, as he frequently moved with his parents. His father struggled with alcoholism and was abusive towards both John and his mother. Additionally, John revealed that he experienced sexual harassment from a female family member, although he did not disclose her identity, stating it was not his mother. John's mother later noted that he had mental health issues from a young age. He spent time in a specialized clinic and took about 20 different medications, but none were effective. John was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and attention deficit syndrome, which caused his mood to fluctuate drastically. In stable moments, he was friendly and cheerful, but he could quickly become volatile when his darker tendencies emerged. In the year John was arrested, he invited a 30-year-old neighbor to his home to watch a movie. Instead of just watching a film, he began to harass her and then attacked and beat her. Fortunately, she survived the assault, managed to escape from his house, and reported him to the police. As a result, John was charged and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Psychiatrists believed he would continue to be a danger to society, yet he was given the opportunity for rehabilitation after his release. One psychiatrist even requested the maximum sentence for someone so dangerous. Despite this, John received a much shorter sentence and was released on parole after just 4 years. Following his release, he violated the terms of his parole dozens of times, but the police took no action. John stopped attending the meetings required by his parole, and there was a victim of one of his attacks who could identify him. However, Candace was visiting her parents for Christmas and was unavailable for questioning. As a result, police decided to visit her and brought 6 photographs. One photo was of the captured rapist, while the other 5 showed men who resembled John. When Candace saw the photo of John, she confidently identified him. All the evidence points to him, although John and his lawyers deny his involvement in Chelsea's disappearance. They cannot explain why his DNA was found on her underwear in the park. Police found it nearly impossible to communicate with the John. He would sit in silence, fixated on one spot, completely ignoring the police. Then, without warning, he would either scream in anger or laugh uncontrollably. At one point, John posed a critical question to the police, hinting that there might be other victims involved in the case. This was the first mention of a girl during the interrogation. The police had not yet investigated the John's connection to the disappearance of 14-year-old Amber, but John's question strongly suggested that his list of victims included not only Chelsea and Candace but also Amber. The police later learned that he had lived near Amber's home when she went missing. However, police chose not to inform the John that they suspected him in Amber's case. Instead, they passed this information to the department that had been investigating Amber's disappearance for over a year. Police worked together to unravel the details of the case. 5 days after the search for Chelsea King began, her body was discovered on March 2, 2010, on the southeast shore of Lake Hodges. She was buried in a shallow grave near the water. Chelsea had been raped and strangled, and male DNA found on her body was that of John Gardner. With this evidence, police were able to charge him with Chelsea's rape and murder, as well as the attempted rape of Candace. The final step was to establish his connection to Amber's disappearance. They continued gathering information and applying pressure on the suspect. John realized that the police would eventually uncover the truth, so he followed his lawyer's advice and decided to strike a deal to reduce his sentence by revealing the location of Amber's body. His only condition was that the fact he disclosed the grave of Amber would not be revealed during the trial. The prosecution accepted this condition. Following John's instructions, they went to Palu, which is near Iskandar. This area was only a few kilometers from where search dogs had previously alerted near an old water tower. The John indicated a spot on the ground, and they started digging. They eventually discovered a human body and retrieved the remains for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing Amber. By this time, the body had severely decomposed. Due to an agreement with the suspect, the prosecution was unable to reveal that John had pointed out the location of Amber's grave. As a result, they could not bring charges against him in connection with the case of schoolgirl Amber. Her family was devastated by this news. They had still held on to hope that their daughter was alive and would come home. Amber's family could not understand why John would kill Amber, especially since they had never hurt anyone. Chelsea's family also experienced similar pain over the murder of their daughters. Amber's parents were furious. They could not understand why the obvious culprit in their daughter's murder was not punished for his actions. However, the police gathered enough evidence to convict him of Chelsea's murder, which was a small but significant victory for the prosecutor's office. The prosecution even expected to achieve the death penalty for the brutal killer. Testimony, DNA evidence, and the victim's body strongly supported the prosecutor's case. However, there was a chance that Amber's case might never be officially resolved. To move forward, a plea deal was proposed involving the Chelsea family, and Amber agreed to this arrangement, which would lead to a guilty verdict for 2 murders. They proposed that John avoid the death penalty in exchange for confessing to the rape and attempted murder of Candace. The deal would save his life, and John promised to consider it. Amber's mother then asked to see John at the hospital. During their meeting, John recounted how, that morning, he had seen a pretty 14-year-old girl who strayed from her usual path to school to meet another girl. However, she never reached her destination. John stopped and threatened her with a gun, forcing her into his car. He then took her to a secluded area, where he raped her and began to strangle her. Despite her pleas for her life, he showed no mercy and strangled her, hiding the body afterward. After John finished telling his story, the mother of the Amber stood up and left without saying a word. She was too overwhelmed to respond. She realized that she had been wrong to suspect Dave of kidnapping Amber. That Dave forgave her for her previous resentment and suspicions. Eventually, the families were able to bury their daughters. In May 2010, John Gardner received 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole for the murders of the 2 girls, along with an additional 25 years for attacking Candace. John expressed remorse and stated that he felt guilty for his actions. Following this, he began experiencing mental health issues and sought medical treatment. After several years, Amber's mother was finally able to forgive her daughter's killer, which brought her relief and closure. This event had a significant impact on society, leading to changes in legislation regarding sexual assault offenders. Penalties, including fines and prison sentences, were increased, and the requirements for supervision after release were strengthened. Additionally, the conditions for parole for these offenses were re-evaluated. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellen Greenberg. Ellen Greenberg was born in New York on June 23, 1993, as the only child of Joshua and Sandy Greenberg. At the time of the events, she was 27 years old and living in Philadelphia. Ellen grew up in a family filled with love and was a cheerful, outgoing girl. In high school, she played softball and golf, excelling as a competitive athlete. She was well-liked and had many friends. Her mother said that she was a special person, able to connect people with each other. After graduating from college, Ellen earned a degree in communications from the University of Pennsylvania. Even so, she felt this was not her true passion. As a result, she took evening classes at the university and eventually earned a teaching degree. After completing her studies, she quickly found a job as a first-grade teacher in Philadelphia. In 2008, Ellen met Samuel Goldberg, the son of a famous family in the area. They started dating soon after. Deeply in love, they soon decided to live together. By 2011, they were engaged and planning to marry in August. Ellen was thrilled and joyfully prepared for the wedding, trying on her dress and sending out invitations. She had no idea that incident would soon take a strange and unexpected turn. On January 26, 2011, while Ellen was at work, Philadelphia had a major snowstorm, prompting the school to close early. Ellen returned to the apartment she shared with her fiancé, Samuel. At around 5 p.m., Samuel went to the gym, he unaware it would be the last time he saw Ellen alive. When he returned at 5:45 p.m., he found the apartment door locked from the inside. He knocked repeatedly, called Ellen's name, phoned her multiple times, and sent 9 text messages, but received no response. Then, he asked the security guard for help to break down the door, but the guard refused, citing rules against leaving post. Determined, he broke down the door himself. Inside, he discovered a horrific scene. Ellen was sitting on the kitchen floor, leaning against the cabinets, with multiple wounds. He immediately called 911. The operator instructed him to check if Ellen was breathing and to perform cardiopulmonary resuscitation. However, he noticed a knife stuck in her chest, preventing him from starting resuscitation. Tragically, Ellen had already passed away. When the police arrived to inspect the scene, they found that the apartment's entrance had not been forced, and inside, everything appeared to be in order, with no signs of a struggle. The door was locked from the inside, and the latch was secured in the usual way until Samuel broke it down, making it unlikely that an intruder had entered. The police also observed that Ellen's hands had no defensive wounds. Despite her multiple injuries, it seemed improbable that she had inflicted them on herself. Nevertheless, waiting for the forensic examination results, the police concluded that Ellen had ended her life, even though there was no note explaining her actions. Additionally, there were fruits on the kitchen table, indicating that Ellen might have been planning to make a fruit salad when she supposedly decided to end her life. The police took Samuel to the station to provide testimony. By this time, Ellen's parents had received the sad news over the phone. They lived in Harrisburg, a 2-hour drive away. When they learned that their only daughter had passed away, they completely collapsed. The very next day, information about Ellen's death has changed. The autopsy revealed she had 20 wounds, 10 on the front and 10 on the neck from the back. Medical examiners emphasized that these injuries showed that this was a murder. She also had bruises on various parts of her body, both recent and older, making it hard to believe she could inflict neck and head wounds on herself from behind. Especially because at least 2 of these wounds were almost fatal and left her unconscious. Additionally, it takes a great deal of force to cause these injuries, especially head injuries. She was found with a knife stuck in her chest after already sustaining 19 injuries. Could she have done all of this by herself? Despite the evidence that has been found, the police disagreed with autopsy officers' conclusion. Authorities announced that Ellen ended her life. They came to this conclusion because they found no signs of anyone else being there. The door was locked from the inside and the neighbors heard no strange sounds, only Samuel's screams. Additionally, DNA analysis of the knife revealed only Ellen's fingerprints. The bruises on her were explained by the police as injuries from playing sports, even though she had not participated in any sports for several years. Doctors also checked Ellen's mental health and learned from her parents that recently, she has been dealing with anxiety. She had been prescribed 2 medications, both known to have side effects that may cause negative thoughts or behaviors. However, her psychiatrist, Len, stated that she showed no signs of end-her-life thoughts. 2 weeks before the incident, when they met, she seemed fine. In addition, the psychiatrist said had never heard Ellen say that anyone had treated her cruelly. Her family also confirmed this. They described Ellen as a good-natured and cheerful. Her loved ones couldn't believe she would harm herself, as she was happy, preparing for her upcoming wedding, and had even tried on her dress and sent out invitations just days before the incident. Ellen's mother and friends admit that she has been feeling anxious and stressed due to work and wedding preparations. However, they consider this to be normal. The thought that she would harm herself just before her wedding was completely out of character. There was a conflict between the forensic medical examination, which ruled it as murder, and the police, who believed Ellen harmed herself. To resolve this, the doctor decided to send a sample from Ellen's spine to a neurologist at the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau. This was to verify the cause of death. Because if one of her severe neck wounds had penetrated deep enough to reach the spinal cord, causing paralysis, she wouldn't have been able to inflict further wounds. This indicated that someone else was responsible for Ellen's death. 3 months after the incident, the medical examiner retracted his murder hypothesis, suggesting instead that Ellen's neck wounds were not severe enough to cause paralysis and that she could have inflicted them on herself. Ellen's parents were not given a clear explanation for this change in the investigation's direction. They described Ellen as squeamish, noting that she avoided even piercing her ears a second time due to her low pain tolerance, making it hard for them to believe she could harm herself. Despite this, the authorities closed the case. Refusing to accept this decision, Ellen's family decided to pursue their own investigation. They hired top experts, including forensic specialists Kirill Klin and Henry Lee, to consider the evidence and the autopsy report. These experts cast doubt on the police investigation report that Ellen did this to herself. In 2012, Henry noted that the likelihood of murder Ellen is significant. Forensic pathologist Cyril Wecht pointed out that statistically, women rarely use sharp objects to end her life and seldom harm themselves through clothing. On the other hand, Bren, a seasoned detective, investigated Ellen's death. After reviewing the footage, Bren claimed to notice that the bloodstains did not match the position in which Ellen was found, as she was sitting and leaning against the kitchen cabinets. However, there was a trail of blood running horizontally from her nose to her ear, and the blood splatter on her shoes indicated that she was standing when she suffered the injuries. All of this led he to assume that the scene of the incident and the position of the body had been altered. Although Ellen's parents tried, the lawyer failed to change the version of incident, as it would have been necessary to present more compelling evidence. Therefore, the case did not progress and remained unchanged until 2015. Andre, an assistant attorney, did not officially take on the case. However, he was intrigued by the unusual circumstances and decided to review the file to understand what drove Ellen to her actions. Ellen's fiancé, Samuel, found her, and he told the police that the door was locked from the inside, which forced him to kick it open. Andre noted in a photograph from the scene that the lock was a simple hotel-style latch. This type of latch can be locked from both the inside and the outside by turning a screw. An analyst mentioned that this kind of latch typically cannot be broken by a kick without dislodging the door from its frame. Yet, the only damage observed on the door was a missing screw. Additionally, the police considered the fact that Ellen had no defensive wounds. It was unclear in which order her injuries occurred, but the final one was undoubtedly to the heart, where the knife was found. If one of the neck wounds had damaged her bone marrow, she would not have had any opportunity to defend herself. One of Ellen's head wounds, which indicated she was attacked from behind, caught Andre's attention. He raised these concerns with the forensic expert, who said a neurologist had examined Ellen and found no injury. He then asked for an official report to confirm there was no spinal injury, only to be told that no such report existed. It had been lost, suggesting it was more of a rumor that no one had substantiated. At the time, there was no neurologist in the Forensic Medical Examination Bureau, so Dr. Adams was brought in. She allegedly examined Ellen's spine and found no damage. However, it later emerged that no record existed of Dr. Adams being asked to perform this examination. In a 2018 interview, Dr. Adams claims that she did not examine Ellen's spine. Following this, Andre contacted a private investigator for the Greenberg family and recommended hiring a private neurologist. He discovered that Ellen's spine sample was still held at the Forensic Bureau, which seemed unnecessary. The family took this advice and hired Dr. Ross. He concluded in a report that Ellen's spinal cord was damaged by 2 severe wounds on her neck, making it impossible for her to inflict further injuries on herself. At the same time, Andre realized that the data the police had was provided by Samuel, Ellen's fiancé, who was at the scene. This was the only account of what happened in the apartment. Samuel said he had not been with Ellen for 45 minutes, and when he returned, he couldn't open the door. Neighbors said they heard Samuel screaming and calling Ellen's name through the door. Samuel said he became worried and started calling Ellen on the phone, sending her 9 text messages. When he got no response, he went downstairs to ask the building security guard if had any tools to open the door, but the guard refused to help. Later, Samuel claimed he went downstairs several more times, trying to persuade the guard to help him break down the door. In his official statement to the police, he said the guard was with him when he kicked the door open and entered. However, the guard told both the police and Ellen's family that he never left his post and did not accompany Samuel into the apartment. Additionally, the guard noted that Samuel, who claimed to have been at the gym, was wearing boots instead of sneakers. On the other hand, Samuel called 911 at 6:33 p.m., which means that an hour had already passed since he returned to the apartment and attempted to contact Ellen. This is very strange when analyzed. Let's think, he goes to the gym for half an hour. Later, when he returned home, he called Ellen to open the door, but she did not answer him. He shouts her name, tries to call her on the phone and sends her 9 text messages. How long should it take to realize that something is wrong? 10 to 20, maybe 30 minutes, but not an hour. Another strange thing that Andre discovered is that Samuel, before calling 911, made 2 calls, one to his parents and another to his uncle, who is a lawyer. Moreover, they arrived at the scene before the emergency services, and it was Samuel's parents who informed Ellen's parents about what happened. One thing is clear, no one would react in the same way as Samuel. Anyone would ask for help as soon as possible to try to save the life of the person they love, right? Andre listened to Samuel's call to 911, and he was surprised to hear Samuel speak in a calm tone. Even as Samuel said things like my God, his fiancée, there is blood, his voice remained steady. When the emergency services worker asked him to describe the situation, he ignored the request and instead talked about his trip to the gym and his return home. When they instructed him to perform CPR, Samuel asked, "Does he really need to do this?" After spending 2 or 3 minutes supposedly performing CPR, he suddenly told them that he had just found a knife stuck in Ellen's chest. Remarkably, although he was beside her the whole time, but before that he had not seen it. This was no small tool, but a 10-inch long meat cleaver. It was clearly visible. After discovering it, he told them that Ellen must have fallen on the knife. Following this, Samuel was taken to the police station to give a statement. He did so only in the presence of his lawyer and provided a very brief statement. After that, he refused to speak to detectives again, despite their repeated attempts to question him. It seemed there was no way to get him to talk. These things made Ellen's family believe that she was murdered. A neurologist hired by Ellen's family discovered a bone marrow perforation and also found signs of strangulation and bruising. However, many researchers reviewed the footage at the scene and were surprised to see only a small amount of blood. Ellen had 20 injuries, which raised suspicions that the crime scene may have been tampered with. However, the investigation did not conduct any crucial tests. The police did not even examine the trash after arriving at the scene. They simply observed and assumed she had died naturally, and without protecting the scene. Additionally, the day after this tragic incident, Samuel's uncle, cousin, and brother visited the apartment, supposedly to retrieve a suit. They took Samuel's laptop, Ellen's laptop, and her cell phone. The police only seized these items on January 29, 3 days later. Upon examination, the laptops showed search queries about ending one's life. Yet, the official report filed in April 2011 did not mention these searches. Ellen's parents and friends slightly changed their views about Samuel after the incident. They never labeled he as a suspect or culprit, but they did have doubts. They realized they had noticed changes in Ellen's behavior weeks before the incident but didn't think much of it at the time. Her friends observed that she started consulting Samuel on every decision, which was unusual for her. Ellen, once a happy girl, had become worried and insecure. One day, she told her parents she wanted to quit her job and move back home. She assuring them it had nothing to do with Samuel and she was fine. Her parents told her she could come home whenever she needed and advised her to seek help for her anxiety. In 2019, Deputy Coroner and Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences Gregory McDonald presented a report supporting the police's version of incident. He stated that Ellen had inflicted superficial wounds on herself, as people often start with shallow cuts before going deeper. However, the deep wounds and marks that looked like signs of an attack also made him suspicious. After the incident, Samuel continued to contact the Greenberg family for a year, but their relationship eventually faded. He later sent them an email announcing his wedding. Today, he is married, has 2 children and lives a normal life, completely unrelated to the Greenberg family. The Greenberg family and their attorney have filed a lawsuit against the medical examiner, who performed the autopsy, and the Philadelphia County Coroner's Office to change and explain why the case was closed. In May 2020, a Philadelphia court finally supported their claim. The family hopes to receive the case file, which they were previously denied access to. There is also a CCTV video from the building. It does not show anything unusual, it only confirms the time Samuel left and returned to the apartment. They also asked to see the 911 call recording. These procedures were delayed, and the trial was rescheduled for 2021. If they win, the case will be reclassified and investigated as a murder. However, due to the time that has passed and the investigation's shortcomings, many clues have been lost forever, such as the luminol test. The Pennsylvania Attorney General's office closed the case in July 2022. The case has been transferred to the Chester County District Attorney's Office, which has assigned new investigators and a prosecutor to take over. This change was supported by Ellen's parents. They have always maintained that their daughter did not end her life. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Marbella Valdez. One was born in Tijuana, Mexico's second-largest city, located in the state of Baja California. In 2020, when this case was being developed, one was 40 years old and owned a cleaning company. Although this was his main job, he seemed to have a true passion for the security sector. On one occasion, he interned at the forensic office of the state prosecutor's office. He is still passionate about being a law enforcement officer. Occasionally, he would even go out on the streets dressed in a police uniform. In August 2019, one met a 20-year-old girl named Marbella Valdez. She has a sweet and cheerful personality. She is often called Bella by her family and friends. As a child, she experienced many hardships. At the age of 5, she was sent to an orphanage. She continued to spend the following years in such facilities. According to local pastor David Lopez, who was present when the girl was admitted to the orphanage, she quickly demonstrated her kind nature and goodwill. This helped her win love and respect from the other children, as well as from the staff there. Although facing many difficulties, Marbella still feels optimistic and loves life. At the orphanage, she made friends like Brenda Valdez and Jairo Solana. Brenda became very close to her. Pastor David observed that they were often playing together and always by each other's side during various activities. They always love, help, and protect each other. Brenda took on the role of an older sister who was always there for her. Over time, Marbella started dreaming of a better future and successfully completed both primary and secondary school. She was considered a good student and actively participated in youth religious groups. She realized that progress comes from studying and working hard, so she started selling sweets to her schoolmates at the age of 16 and did extra work as a house cleaner. Fortunately, on her journey to success, Marbella had support. William Messick, an American IT executive, had been helping her and Brenda for some time. In 2014, he started a program to aid orphans from Tijuana, Mexico. His idea is to help children during the most difficult and vulnerable stages of their lives, until they are mature enough to face life on their own. Having been an orphan himself, William understood their struggles. His project included a scholarship program. After meeting Brenda, they formed a close bond, like father and daughter. Brenda told him about her friend, Marbella, from the orphanage, and soon he included Marbella in his program. In 2018, Marbella graduated from high school. She then enrolled at the Autonomous University of Baja California to pursue her dream of becoming a lawyer, with a focus on protecting children's rights. As she entered adulthood, William helped both Marbella and Brenda rent an apartment. Later, when she expressed her desire to live independently, and William once again supported her, acknowledging her maturity and sense of responsibility. During this time, she started university and also looked for a job to support herself. With William's help, she even purchased a car to commute easily between work, university, and home. Marbella started working at a gas station owned by Randy Chicas, a Mexican company that supports women. Her shift began at 5:30 a.m. and ended at noon. After lunch, she would head to the university to study law. Despite her packed schedule, but she made time for church services. It was at the gas station that she met Juan, who owned a cleaning company. One day, he stopped by to fill up the company car. He was immediately attracted by the friendliness and charm of Marbella. From then on, he made it a point to visit the station almost daily, filling up his cars and trying to strike up a conversation with Marbella. She treated him with the same courtesy and smile she gave to all her other customers. Soon, Juan started giving Marbella gifts, such as sweets, toys, and chocolate. He even brought breakfast for her and other female employees. She told William, who she thought of as her father, about Juan's actions. William warned Marbella to be careful since Juan was much older. However, she said she wasn't interested in Juan. For she, a 20-year-old girl, the attention of an older person like Juan seemed funny and even ridiculous. Her colleagues also found the situation funny. Everyone considered Juan to be a friendly and respectable person, not a threat to young girls. Marbella made it clear she wasn't interested in Juan and often turned down his invitations to meet. Juan didn't take these rejections well, and his behavior started to change. Marbella noticed that Juan would often follow her after her shift at the gas station. He seemed to always know her whereabouts and would appear, asking her to go with him. There were times when she suspected he of following her home. She mentioned this strange behavior to her colleagues. On Wednesday, February 5, 2020, Marbella failed to show up for work at the gas station and did not contact anyone to explain her absence. Marbella and her friend Brenda, although not living together, would meet up several times a week. Brenda had a young son whom Marbella adored and visited often. They would talk on the phone daily. Brenda, who worked the night shift, would usually call Marbella every morning after returning home. That Wednesday, Brenda and Marbella didn't talk as usual. Brenda woke up around 9 a.m. to find a message from Marbella saying she had a stomach ache and wouldn't be going to work. Instead, she planned to see a doctor. This message worried Brenda for two reasons: her health and the unusual manner in which the message was written. It was also strange that she didn't call. Brenda tried to reach Marbella but couldn't, so she contacted their mutual friends. However, none of them had any information about Marbella's whereabouts. The group of friends began searching for Marbella in local hospitals and medical centers, but they couldn't find her anywhere. Brenda and one of her friends decided to visit Marbella's house. They knocked on the door and rang the bell, but there was no answer. Normally, Marbella would leave a window slightly open for her friends to come and go. This time, the window was wide open. Brenda climbed in through the window and found the interior of the house looking as if Marbella had just come home from university. Her belongings, including books, clothes, bag, and car keys, were all in their usual places. However, Marbella is missing. Throughout the day, they searched various locations but found nothing. According to Brenda, they went to the police to report Marbella missing. However, because Marbella was an adult, police regulations required waiting 3 days before launching an official search. Despite this, an investigation began right away. Brenda and her friends started making flyers with Marbella's photo. Marbella was described as a young girl with brown eyes, long straight chestnut red hair, dark skin, a slim build, a height of 1.50 meters, and a weight of 45 kilograms. They posted and distributed these flyers throughout the city. At the same time, William used his network of contacts to launch a search campaign for Marbella. Along with Brenda, they even attempted to hack into Marbella's phone to determine her location, but this was unsuccessful. In a later interview, Brenda mentioned that even Juan's behavior became more suspicious. 3 days after Marbella's disappearance, on February 8th, the police received a call from a man who reported finding a woman's body in a dump in the Colonia Te Collet area. This location was over 26 miles from Marbella's house in southern Tijuana and was so remote. It took the police a long time to locate this site, but they eventually arrived. Among a pile of garbage, they discovered a large black bag containing the body of a young woman. She was dressed in blue pajamas with images of black puppies and animal print slippers. The body was almost face down, with the legs tied with a yellow cord and the hands tied behind the back with a pink scarf wrapped. The body was taken to the morgue for examination, while investigators collected evidence at the scene. After finding the body, police informed Brenda that the body's characteristics matched the description of Marbella. Brenda and William immediately went to the morgue, but were told they had to wait until the next day to examine the body. Juan unexpectedly appeared and helped them gain access to the morgue. Unfortunately, they determined that the body was that of Marbella. At that time, Juan did not know that Brenda and Marbella's friends had reported him to the police, as they suspected him of stalking Marbella. The police requested permission from Marbella's family to carry out a forensic examination and conduct other investigations to collect evidence. The examination of Marbella's remains took about 5 days. Mourning began on February 13, 2020, and continued until February 14. Juan attended the wake and funeral, he wearing a T-shirt with her image. This made her friends extremely angry. Despite their anger, they remained silent, follow the instructions of the authorities so that he does not become suspicious, as they feared he might escape before sufficient evidence was collected for his arrest. At Marbella's funeral, Jose Ruiz, a close friend of hers, spotted an individual with scratches on his neck. This man behaved strangely, repeatedly approaching the coffin, threatening people with a knife, and offered to carry flowers to the cemetery in his car. Meanwhile, police are still trying their best to investigate Marbella's death. Forensic results revealed that she died from asphyxia due to severe compression of her neck, which blocked her air supply. She also suffered serious blows to the abdomen, causing damage to her internal organs. In front of the University of Baja California, Marbella's classmates held a memorial in her memory. They emphasized that she was a victim of violence by men, a serious problem taking place across Mexico. The investigation into Marbella's killing included interviews with people who knew her. Through the interviews, it was learned that a few days before she was killed, she had spoken to Juan. He said that he was a federal police officer in Baja California and worked as a specialist at the Attorney General's office. However, it was discovered that he had only interned at the Attorney General's office. Additionally, some media outlets reported that he had a criminal record and was imprisoned for offenses related to illegal substances in the state of Sonora. The results of a search of Marbella's car were even more troubling, as experts found a hidden geolocation device. Later, a search of Juan's house uncovered several similar devices and satellite detection receivers. This explains why he always knows where she is. However, the most compelling evidence came from a forensic examination of the body, which revealed fingerprints and semen. DNA analysis confirmed that these matched the genetic sample taken from Juan when he was brought in for questioning. An analysis of Marbella's mobile phone showed that her phone and Juan's were always in the same locations during her disappearance. This shows that he used her phone to send messages to her friends. A few days after the funeral, Juan was charged with the murder of Marbella, and on February 22, 2020, he appeared in court for the first time. During this hearing, it was revealed that after her disappearance, he contacted the state attorney general's office several times to ask about the investigation's progress. He also expressed his wish that the person responsible for Marbella's death would not be punished. The authorities stated that Juan had always been the main suspect in the case, due to previous reported incidents of harassment. It was said that he was obsessed with Marbella, even though he had known her for only 5 months. Since then, he had been under police surveillance. According to the investigation, he allegedly entered her house and kidnapped her. The incident occurred between February 5th and 8th in the Sy-Kotlef Aliman neighborhood, where Juan lived. There he kept she, exerting physical and sexual violence, which caused injuries to her face, stomach, and genitals, ultimately leading to her death. The conclusion in the case was that Marbella died of lack of oxygen, caused by compression of the neck, which blocked the airway and blood vessels. She also sustained severe bruising to her abdomen, causing damage to internal organs. Juan's DNA matched semen found in Marbella's body, and a considerable amount of tissue was found under her fingernails, indicating a struggle. During the hearing, mobile phone tracking data revealed that Juan and Marbella's phones were together starting from the morning of February 5th. The body was discovered at Marbella's home. Another important clue is that their phones were also together on February 2nd. This was also the day Marbella reported her house and car keys missing. On February 27th, at a hearing in the Superior Court of Tijuana, Judge Daniel Aguilar Patina concluded there is enough evidence to accuse Juan of killing Marbella. The judge highlighted that Juan deliberately misled everyone about Marbella's whereabouts, pretending to be worried in front of her family and at the gas station, while he actually knew what was going on. He was temporarily detained in MIAs, but maintained his innocence regarding. His trial occurred from September 14th to 29th, 2022. Over 2 years after the incident, forensic evidence and testimony from people close to Marbella were presented. It was discovered that on the morning Marbella went missing, a colleague had called her, noting that she had not been to the gas station. She only managed to say she was unwell before the connection was broken. Her friends described her as a wonderful person and identified Juan as a harasser. She never believed she was in danger, so she didn't file an official complaint against Juan, she thinking he would lose interest after her repeated rejections. Other witnesses mentioned that he often pretended to be a law enforcement officer, but he was just an intern at the University of Justice. After reviewing all the evidence and listening to the testimonies, Judge Marta Elvia Luna Vargas declared that Juan committed the horrendous crime, he that took Marbella's life. She then sentenced Juan to 42 years and 6 months in prison for the murder of Marbella Valdez. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellie Nessler. In the small town of Jamestown, California, Daniel Mark Driver was on trial for child abuse. One of Daniel's victims was William Nelayer, a defenseless child. William's mother, Ellie, felt that the justice system had failed to protect her son, so Ellie took matters into her own hands with a gun. The case sparked widespread debate, with some people fully supporting Ellie, while others criticized her actions. Ultimately, the discussion surrounding the case attracted national attention. Jamestown was a small, quiet town with a population of about 3,500 at the time of the incident. Ellie was the eldest of 3 daughters. Her parents were hardworking miners who taught Ellie the importance of self-reliance from a young age. As a result, she grew up to be strong and independent. During her teenage years, Ellie began to help her family by looking for work. It was a tough economic time. She took on various jobs to supplement her income. She also helped her parents by taking care of her younger siblings. When Ellie turned 20, she fell in love with a guy she met, and they quickly entered a romantic relationship. Soon after, they got married, but their marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. Her next partner was Bill, who worked as a miner. Additionally, Bill operated construction equipment, allowing him to earn a good income. They married in 1982 and soon welcomed a son named William. Bill grew up in an area that was once the center of the gold rush. As a child, he had listened to stories of old men panning for gold in the river, which inspired him to seek their adventure, even though the land was largely depleted by then. In search of better fortune, Bill and his family traveled to Liberia, West Africa, during the gold rush. While Bill was prospecting for gold, Ellie gave birth to their daughter, Rebecca. Unfortunately, Rebecca's early years were not peaceful. Suddenly, shortly after her birth, civil war broke out in Liberia. As a result, Ellie and the children returned to Jamestown, while Bill remained in West Africa, determined to make his fortune mining gold. During this time, Ellie faced numerous challenges in the United States. She received no support from Bill, and although she was a strong and independent woman, managing a household and caring for 2 young children proved to be very difficult for her. They relied on government assistance and occasional jobs that Ellie managed to find. During this period, she received support from her family and the church, which she attended regularly with her children and sister. Her mother often advised her to be self-reliant but also to carry a gun in her handbag for protection. Ellie took this lesson to heart. Despite her delicate appearance, she was always prepared to defend herself and, if needed, to take the initiative in a confrontation. This aspect of her character would later lead to tragic consequences. Ellie is very close to her children and does not let them go far. This protectiveness stems from her own traumatic experience as a child, when she was molested by an adult man. After she confided in her mother reacted violently and threatened him to leave town. This incident left Ellie with lasting psychological scars that she has struggled with throughout her life. She fears that her children may face similar dangers. When her son William went to summer camp away from home, she felt very anxious and scared. Despite her worries, William kept asking his mother to let him go to the summer camp organized by the church. Ellie was very anxious about letting her son spend time with others without her supervision. She hadn't even allowed him to sleep over at friends' houses. Eventually, her sister Jenna reassured her, explaining that she knew the camp organizers well and described them as respectable and good people. After thinking it over, Ellie finally agreed to let her son go, hoping he would enjoy himself. William spent 3 weeks at a church-run tent camp. After returning from the summer camp, Ellie noticed a change in William's behavior. William became aggressive, often sad, and stopped communicating. Ellie sensed that something was bothering him. Despite her and her family's efforts to find out what was happening at the camp, William refused to discuss it with adults. He insisted on being treated like an adult and wanted them to stop asking him questions. Younger sister Rebecca and his mother thought he was trying to imitate the older teenagers he had met at the camp. When the new school year started a few weeks later, everyone thought William was settling in well with his friends. However, when he returned to class, things did not improve. He began to withdraw from his family and became more aggressive with his classmates, rarely interacting with others. His anger often became uncontrollable, and these incidents had increased since he had been at the camp. Ellie was confused by William's changes, and it took her over a year to discover the reason behind them. Unfortunately, the truth behind it was quite heartbreaking. Daniel Mark Driver, a 30-year-old man who attended the same church as Ellie and her children, had recently moved in with his mother, who lived nearby. He was considered a good man and an active member of the church, known for his community involvement and willingness to help other parishioners. He always carried a Bible with him and could easily recite passages from it. Daniel took on the role of kitchen staff at the summer camp and also helped supervise the children, who always spoke positively of him. He is a natural psychologist. According to his parents, Daniel can help solve any difficult situation. Students often come to him to confide in him when they are in trouble. Many boys who do not have fathers consider Daniel as a father figure. With his persuasive skills, he can talk to any teenager. William experienced a significant change in his relationship with Daniel. William used to enjoy spending time with Daniel and interacting with him. But after returning from summer camp, William became noticeably anxious even during casual encounters. During this time, William often argued with his sister Rebecca, seemingly starting conflicts for no reason, and William also began to defy his mother. He had never argued with Ellie before, but now he became increasingly defiant. Occasionally, William's Aunt Jen, who was very close to the family, would take William to her home for the weekend. This gave his mother a break. About 9 months after the camp, Jen took William to her home for a weekend. During his stay, he had the opportunity to spend time with his cousins. Each time, Jen tried to discuss the major changes in his behavior, but William was quiet and avoided answering her questions. However, he later confided in her a secret, insisting that she not tell anyone, not even his mother. Jen agreed to keep it a secret. 7-year-old William shared his experience while he was at summer camp. Daniel began to behave inappropriately towards him. One day, the Daniel lured William into the woods with the promise of showing him frogs and other animals. However, as they went deeper into the woods, the Daniel began to abuse him. This abuse continued regularly, even after the summer camp ended. The boy was afraid to go to church and tried to avoid the Daniel as much as possible. The abuse began when William was 6 years old, and during this time, the Daniel threatened him, saying that he would harm William and his family if he revealed what was happening. Fearing danger to his loved ones, William kept quiet, and the abuse continued for many months. After hearing the story, Jen felt she had to talk to Ellie. She apologized to William for revealing his secret, but felt the need to take action against the rapist and put an end to his actions. Jen first spoke to her sister Ellie about what had happened to William. Ellie was shocked and blamed herself for exposing her child to such a problem. From the beginning, her maternal instincts warned her that William should not attend the camp. However, she succumbed to the pressure, leading to the outcome she feared and experienced. William worried that the man might come back and act on his threat if he found out that William had told anyone about the incident. The boy became increasingly anxious and fearful. He often came home from school in tears, telling his mother that he had seen Daniel's car in the distance. The panic attacks became more frequent, and he began to feel paranoid. He tried his best to cope, but the situation was still not good. Ellie then reported the molestation involving their son to the police. Police checked Daniel's record in a national database, discovering a worrying history of crimes involving children. In 1984, he was charged with indecent exposure to 5 boys in the San Jose area. Although he was arrested, his church community sent letters of support to him before the trial. With no solid evidence other than the boys' testimony, the judge ultimately decided to give Daniel probation instead of a prison sentence, allowing him to escape the consequences of his actions. This leniency allowed him to continue his harmful actions. Daniel then decided to move away and start over. He moved closer to his mother, where no one knew about his past crimes. Daniel also started attending church and developed a healthy relationship with a woman who had a young son. He became more involved with the children, working with them, giving them advice, and eventually got a job at a church summer camp, where he was often around children. However, the woman began to notice Daniel's unusual behavior towards her child and started to pay closer attention. She eventually asked her son if Daniel had ever bothered him, but the boy appeared confused and insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened. The mother, doubting her son's honesty and fearing he was too scared to speak up, did not dismiss her concerns. She continued to monitor Daniel's behavior. A few months later, she caught Daniel molesting her son. She then contacted a friend who was the district attorney. A background check revealed that Daniel had served 5 months in 1983 for child abuse. Concerns about him grew when William's case occurred, prompting the boy's mother, Ellie, to contact the police. At that point, the police investigated Daniel more closely and gathered evidence from new victims of his molestation. After Ellie reported the incident, the police stepped up their efforts to prevent similar crimes by Daniel. Police began questioning all the families who had come into contact with Daniel, including children who had attended the camp. Many of them reported similar experiences, which helped police understand the tactics Daniel used. He repeatedly targeted boys, gaining their trust while threatening to kill them and their families if they spoke out, which proved effective. Police identified 5 new victims in the area, including William. In 1983, charges were filed, but they were unable to arrest Daniel because he had been out of town for an extended period of time. At the time, it was difficult to track his whereabouts due to the lack of cell phones, GPS, and other tracking technology. Police suspected that he had learned of the investigation and had gone into hiding. Both Daniel and his car were placed on the wanted list, and his photo was widely circulated in the press. However, despite these efforts, it took several years to find him. Meanwhile, William's depression and aggressive behavior continued. He frequently got into fights at school, did poorly in school, and became a bully. As a result, William was expelled from several schools and transferred several times. Ellie believes her son's behavior stems from past violence that has deeply affected him. She sought help for her son, taking him to numerous doctors and psychologists in hopes of improving his situation, but nothing seemed to work. In 1993, police finally caught up with Daniel at a store in Palo Alto, California, for shoplifting. After confessing to the theft, Daniel faced charges not only for shoplifting but also for child abuse. Even after Daniel was arrested and awaiting trial, William continued to feel afraid. He struggled to accept that he would have to face his abuser in court. William would have to testify against him, but the thought of it filled him with dread. William was so anxious that the mere mention of the trial made him feel sick. In desperation, Ellie approached the prosecutor to request special arrangements for her son's testimony. She hoped William could testify without Daniel present to spare him serious emotional distress. Unfortunately, the current rules required William to appear before a jury. To address this situation, the only solution was to install cameras so that William could provide testimony from another room. He would be recorded, and the video would be shown in court. Unfortunately, the small community lacked the funds to set this up. As a result, William had to appear in court like the other boys who had also been victimized by the Daniel. The trial was challenging due to the presence of many emotionally and physically traumatized children. The boys who had already testified had experienced significant distress, but they managed to get through it. On April 2, 1993, 11-year-old William was one of the last witnesses to take the stand. Ellie tried to prepare him for his meeting with Daniel the criminal as best she could. However, when the car carrying William and his relatives arrived at the courthouse, William did not want to leave. He began to have a panic attack and vomited violently. Ellie reassured him that he needed to testify because testifying was the only way to ensure that a dangerous person would be locked up and unable to harm anyone else. William understood the importance of his testimony, but his fear made it difficult for him to calm down. Ellie, William, and the aunts waited outside the courthouse to be called to testify. During this time, they tried to comfort William and help him calm down. Suddenly, a van arrived at the courthouse and Daniel was taken out. When William saw Daniel, he felt nauseous again. Ellie stared at Daniel as he walked through the courthouse yard. She later remembered that Daniel just smirked and walked past. She felt a burning hatred for this man. As they left the building, Daniel's ex-girlfriend and her son, who was also a victim, testified against him. The woman told Ellie that things were not going well. She noted that the children were nervous and confused in their testimony. Daniel took advantage of this by highlighting inconsistencies in their testimony. He continued to put the children in difficult situations, asking distressing questions that only made them more confused. They became increasingly upset, some of them crying. This makes Ellie worried about William. Ellie fears that the situation could affect the trial, potentially allowing a dangerous criminal to escape justice and return to his former criminal ways. At that moment, Ellie Nessler suddenly realizes that she must serve justice, and Daniel must be stopped forever. Court in this county lack modern security features like metal detectors. It is easy to carry guns inside. And many people in the community, including Jen, carry weapons for self-defense. While on the street, Ellie reached into her purse and quietly pulled out a gun. She hid the weapon as they entered the courtroom, where Ellie shot Daniel 6 times. 5 of the bullets hit him in the back of the head and neck, killing him instantly. People in the courtroom panicked and fled, and police rushed in with loaded guns. Jen stepped in front of her sister, causing Ellie to throw the gun to the ground and raise her hands in surrender. She was then arrested. The shocking story of a mother staging a lynching during a court hearing quickly made national headlines. Within a week, every major media outlet had covered the incident, sparking widespread debate about the lynching. Many saw Ellie as a hero, receiving overwhelming support from local residents, especially those affected by the event. 2 local banks even set up defense funds that the community could contribute to for Ellie, leading to a rush of donations from her supporters. Items such as T-shirts that read "Good shot, Ellie" became popular and which sold well. Similar stickers could be found on cars all over the country. Despite this, Ellie couldn't be celebrated as a national hero for her actions. She was arrested and had a bail set at $500,000. This amount was provided by a guarantor from Seaman, allowing her to return home before the hearings and await trial in her own community. However, not everyone agreed with her decision, and she faced criticism from some members of society who accused her of taking the law into her own hands. Still, the majority, including the local community, viewed her as a protector of her child. Police uncovered additional details about Ellie's situation. They found that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs when she fired her weapon in the courthouse. Ellie claimed she used these substances to give herself the courage needed to endure the stressful courtroom hearings. In October 1993, she received a diagnosis of breast cancer, with doctors estimating she only had 5 years to live. Initially found guilty of manslaughter, Ellie was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, her conviction was later overturned due to the jury's misconduct. She then reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting guilt to manslaughter, and ultimately served 3 years in prison before her release. William then moved in with his Aunt Jen. After 2 years, he was finally able to communicate with Ellie, who was still serving her sentence in prison. Ellie expressed her feelings. She deeply regretted having to take someone's life, which was never her intention. However, she felt that the justice system would not be able to protect her son and other children from a dangerous criminal. The only reason she pulled the trigger was the fear that Daniel would be released again. William's life was ruined at a key moment in his growing up. He was molested and then dragged through the courts. The William became a hooligan, got involved with bad company, and lost his way. As a result, he had frequent encounters with the law, with courts and prison becoming a regular part of his life. He was first charged with a crime at the age of 14. He was incarcerated 18 times between 1999 and 2004 for various crimes. His criminal record was extensive, including charges of robbery, assault, illegal possession of a weapon, and drug-related offenses. In 2004, when he turned 23, William was living freely, had several tattoos, and resided in his family's house. He didn't have a permanent job, so, similar to his mother in her younger days, he was searching for temporary work for short periods. However, while Ellie had to do this out of necessity due to the economic crisis, for William, it was a result of his involvement in criminal activities. In 2004, he also took a part-time job with his friend David, helping to clean his house during construction and repairs. David had become disabled from working in the oil fields. In June, a dispute arose when tools went missing from the construction site, with both sides blaming each other. When the police arrived, William attacked David and beat him. Due to this incident, along with the previous charges, he was sentenced to 60 days in prison but was released after only 30 days. On July 26, 2004, just an hour after his release, he returned to his workplace. David attempted to escape but was unable to due to his disability. William then attacked David, kicking him in the head several times. As a result, David lost consciousness and died in hospital the following day. William fled the scene but was arrested a few days later and charged with first-degree murder. In June 2005, William Nessler was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rebecca was the only one to escape the tragic fate and now lives a normal life with her family and children, often reflecting on the absence of her mother and brother during important moments. She deeply misses her brother William, who always looked out for her. Rebecca believes that William would not have ended up in prison if their mother had not shot Daniel. This tragic event caused a series of unfortunate events that made their lives worse. Despite this, she does not resent her mother. She understands that her mother was confused and made a hasty decision. In the end, Rebecca feels that her mother's actions prevented many boys from facing the same fate. Ellie's life ended in tragedy. In addition to battling breast cancer, she faced legal troubles. She became involved in distributing illegal drugs. In 2002, she bought materials for making drugs from a police informant. Initially, Ellie provided some drugs to the informant, but 5 days later, when she returned to collect the pills, she was arrested after the informant reported her. Ellie confessed to her crimes and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but she only served 4 years. She was released in 2006, but sadly, Ellie Nessler passed away from breast cancer on December 26, 2008, at the age of 56. When Ellie died, William asked to be released from prison to say goodbye to his mother. But his request was denied. 2 years later, In 2010, Rebecca and a reporter visited her brother in prison. They spoke for about 2.5 hours. During the conversation, William was very reflective, reviewing everything that had happened in his life. He did not try to justify his actions or blame anyone else. He noted that he felt he had been pushed down a path of self-destruction at the age of 6, a burden he would always carry. William emphasized how public opinion affected him, especially when the case of Daniel, a rapist who was murdered in court, was heavily covered by the media. The attention affected him. The whole community knew that William was also a victim, sexually abused at the age of 6. People discussed his past, which made him feel ashamed. He doesn't want this attention, but it's hard for him to escape it. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leon Britz. The Sharetha and Leon Britz case of 2020 not only shocked South Africa, where it took place, but also attracted international attention. From the very beginning, the investigation identified an innocent person as the prime suspect. Only through a surprising confession was the real culprit revealed. The Leon family, European immigrants, moved to the small town of Patter in the Northern Cape province of South Africa in the early 1970s. While Patter is modest in size, it plays a significant role as an economic and tourist center in the Bushmanland region. Leon has an older brother named Toki. Leon's family is relatively wealthy for their community. His father owns the only large hotel in the area, which later expanded into a large hotel and restaurant complex. Both Toki and Leon did well in school. After finishing school, Toki left his hometown, while Leon chose to stay. He helped his parents run the hotel as a teenager and studied business. Leon is intelligent and has a natural talent for business, which has helped him run the hotel effectively. At the Leon family hotel, many events, parties, and celebrations took place. During one of these occasions, Leon spotted a beautiful young girl among the guests. She was a brunette with green eyes and a charming smile. Curious, he approached her to introduce himself and discovered that she was only 14 years old and still in school, although she appeared much more mature. This revelation confused Leon, who was 25 at the time. Despite his concerns, he asked her to dance, and afterwards, they spent about an hour talking on the terrace. The girl's name was Sharetha, and from that moment, Leon could not stop thinking about her and eagerly anticipated their next meeting. Sharetha was born on September 6, 1990, the youngest of 3 children to immigrants from Eastern Europe. Her family faced severe financial hardship. When Sharetha was only 9 years old, her father died of a snake bite, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on her own, while struggling to provide for them. As a result, all 3 sisters had to go to work to help support the family, leading to a difficult and arduous childhood. Leon, a rich guy, suddenly entered her life. Leon truly loved her. He found every opportunity to see her, picked her up from school, took her to trendy restaurants, gave her expensive gifts and trendy clothes, and tried his best to make her happy. Sharetha experienced the luxuries and wealth. She realized that with him, she had the ability to build a family where she and her future children would never have to worry about money. Sharetha's mother approved of the relationship, despite her daughter's young age. She considered Leon to be trustworthy, decent, and kind, and no one doubted his sincerity. However, Leon's parents were quite concerned about the relationship, as it could lead to serious legal problems if it went too far. Despite their concerns, Leon insisted that he was willing to wait until Sharetha turned 18 when he planned to marry her. About a year into the relationship, 15-year-old Sharetha discovered she was pregnant. She was unsure about sharing the news, knowing that it would upset both her mother and her boyfriend. To hide her changing body, she began wearing baggy clothes and became quiet and withdrawn. Eventually, she couldn't keep it a secret any longer and decided to tell Leon. When she revealed the news, Leon was stunned. He realized that the situation would not only damage his reputation, but also create serious legal problems. Leon was worried about being accused of seducing a young woman, so he couldn't let that happen. He took her to a private clinic, where they confirmed she was pregnant with twins. Leon found a doctor at the same clinic who would perform anonymous abortions. Sarita was heartbroken. Leon, who had promised to love and protect her, was now pressuring her to end the lives of their unborn children. Leon, who was older, convinced her that it was necessary. He promised that after marriage they would have children, but now having children would ruin their lives and their dreams of a happy future together. Left with no other choice, Sarita agreed to the procedure. She experienced physical pain for days afterward, but the emotional trauma was even worse, leaving her feeling guilty and deeply depressed. She isolated herself in her room, crying constantly. Her mother did not understand the severity of the situation, thinking that her daughter was simply upset after an argument with her boyfriend, believing that things would be better once they made up. A few days later, Leon visited Sarita at her home. He then took her into town to walk around the park and do some shopping. He thought this would help her feel better. Although she eventually returned to her normal routine, her feelings of resentment and suspicion towards him remained. 3 years later, during her senior year of high school, the Sarita discovered she was pregnant again. She was just a few months away from turning 18, and this unexpected pregnancy was not supposed to create any significant problems. However, when she informed Leon, he reacted very negatively and insisted that she terminate the pregnancy, claiming they were too young to start a family. This time, Sarita firmly refused, stating that she would keep the child, even if it meant raising it alone. After some consideration, Leon eventually proposed to her, presenting a diamond ring. By this time, the intense feelings they had for each other had faded, but Sarita's pregnancy left him with no choice. Shortly after her 18th birthday, the couple got married in a lavish ceremony. Although they appeared happy, they both had doubts about their decision. A few months later, they welcomed their first son, and 2 years later, they had twin boys. The family lived a wealthy life. Leon's parents built a successful business over many years. Leon also started his own fast food chain and restaurant, which was thriving. However, starting in the mid-2010s, the family faced significant challenges. In 2014, Leon's father suddenly passed away due to long-standing heart problems, which affected his mother's health. She began to show signs of rapid dementia, forcing her sons to take her to a specialist clinic for care. Toki returned to his hometown after many years to assist his younger brother in managing the family business, and together they took over the operation of a hotel. Leon decided to let Sarita join the family business, something she had always wanted to do. They agreed to register a mining equipment and tools store in her name. She worked hard at the store while also caring for their 3 young sons. However, as the twins grew older, the parents had to find a suitable school for all of their children. Finding quality education in South Africa was not easy. They eventually found a good school in the nearby town of Kakamas, about 75 miles from Leon's home. They then rented a spacious house in Kakamas for Sarita and her sons to live in, while Leon stayed in Poeter to manage the business. Although Sarita enjoyed running the store, she had to give up that role to focus on raising the children. The family only visited Leon on weekends and holidays, and he rarely came to Kakamas because of his busy schedule. At first, everything seemed fine between the couple, but over time, they grew more distant, and their feelings for each other faded. In 2018, Sarita began experiencing health issues, which she initially dismissed. However, medical tests revealed that she had cancer and cardiovascular problems. She quickly underwent surgery to remove the malignant tumor and began a treatment plan. Thankfully, the timely intervention saved her life, but she now required ongoing therapy at a clinic in Johannesburg, which was quite costly. Leon's family was able to pay for Suretha's medical expenses. To help manage the household while she was receiving treatment, Suretha hired a nanny and a maid. By this time, Leon and Suretha had grown apart and were living separate lives. Suretha began an affair in Johannesburg. It appears that Leon was also seeing other women, as evidenced by explicit photos and text messages found on his phone. The couple now only stay in touch because of their 3 children. Despite the family problems, business is doing well. The hotel, retail stores, and restaurant chain are making a significant profit. Leon has invested some of this money in real estate in major cities, which provides a good income through rentals. Their family is not only the richest in Poeter, but also one of the richest in the Northern Cape province. As Leon's business grew more profitable, he faced increasing threats from jealous people who wanted to harm him, his parents, and his brother. To protect his assets, he installed safes and hidden compartments in his office and home, where he stored cash in various currencies, stocks, diamonds, jewelry, and gold bars. Although the threats initially worried him, Leon eventually began to ignore them as they became a regular occurrence. He believed they were just attempts to scare him. A tragic event occurred that led to Leon's death. On October 7, 2020, Suretha called him to check on their dogs. A neighbor reported that they had escaped. Leon assured her that he would call back after checking on the dogs, but he never did. Worried, Suretha tried calling him several times, but no one answered. She left their children with a nanny and drove to their home in Poeter. When she arrived, the front door was unlocked, but the house was eerily quiet and no one answered her calls. She went to the backyard and discovered her husband's body floating face down in the pool. There were wounds on his back, indicating that he was dead. In a panic, Suretha called the police, then contacted Toki to inform him of the situation. When the police arrived, they quickly sealed off the house. They found that Leon had died violently. His body had multiple stab wounds and signs of a struggle. A safe in the house had been opened and its contents taken. Initially, the police theorized that a burglar had broken into the house. And Leon was home at the time, leading to a confrontation that left Leon dead. However, many other valuables that could be seen in the house were still intact, suggesting that the burglars had specifically targeted the contents of the safe. Following Leon's murder, much speculation about the cause of his death arose on social media. Many people knew about the threats Leon had received over the years and suspected that competitors or enemies may have acted on those threats. Police later identified Leon's brother Toki as the prime suspect. Toki had managed the family business with Leon for many years and had visited Leon shortly before the murder, making Toki the last person known to have seen Leon alive. Complicating matters, their mother is critically ill, with doctors estimating that she has only a few months to live. It is rumored that Toki is unhappy with the way the estate has been divided, especially with Leon receiving the lion's share, and that Toki may want to change the will. This theory explains why other items in the house were left intact and why the killer only targeted the contents of the safe. However, Toki adamantly denied any involvement, claiming that he would never harm his brother, especially since they had never had any conflicts over money. He sought the support of Suretha, who expressed her belief in his innocence and offered to help him find a good lawyer. For nearly 2 months, the investigation had stalled with no new evidence, leads, or witnesses. Then, 35-year-old Jacques van Vuren walked into the police station and proposed a deal. He would plead guilty and reveal the identities of his accomplices in exchange for a lighter sentence. Jacques and Suretha had been friends in school, and he had feelings for her, But she did not love him and eventually started dating Leon. They had not seen each other for many years, but one day they ran into each other at a shopping mall and started talking. Jacques was having a hard time at the time. He had gone through a divorce, lost his job, was an alcoholic, and was in dire need of money. Suretha realized that Jacques still had feelings for her, so she opened up to him about her unhappy marriage. She told him that her husband was abusive and treated her badly, but she felt trapped because he threatened to take their sons away and leave her nothing. Jacques was prevented from seeing his children by his ex-wife after the divorce, so he felt a deep sympathy for Suretha and wanted to help her. They exchanged phone numbers, and a few days later, Suretha called him with a tearful story. She claimed that her husband had abused her and that she could not leave him. She suggested that the only solution was to get rid of him. Suretha was a master of psychological manipulation, and Jacques believed her. Suretha also promised to pay him 500,000 South African rand, which was a lot of money, especially when he was in dire need of money. Jacques agreed to help her, but did not want to do it himself, so he decided to hire someone else to do it. After a while, Leon's business began to decline. All his chain stores began to close and suffered huge losses. Leon wanted to sell the hotel, but Suretha did not agree. At the end of September, Suretha and Jacques decided to start their plan. Jacques asked for half of the money in advance. However, due to financial problems, Suretha could only withdraw 100,000 rand and gave Jacques her diamond ring. With this money, Jacques hired a friend named Enrich Williams, who had a drug problem and was willing to kill for money. Enrich was worried that he could not handle a strong adult alone, so he brought in his friend Untold to help him with the plan, and Enrich would share the proceeds with Untold. Suretha gave the criminals her home address and told them where the safe was. She allowed them to take valuables from the house to make it look like a robbery. The only condition was that the dogs were not harmed, so they were released first. The neighbors noticed that the family's dogs were out and called her. This indicated that Enrich and Untold were in the house. She then called her husband Leon to lure him into a trap. When he entered the house, one of the criminals hit him on the head with a baseball bat, while another attacked him with a knife, leaving him no chance to defend himself. Leon was stabbed 8 times and beaten with the bat several times. They then dumped his body in the swimming pool. After opening the safe, Untold and Enrich found no cash, only securities, diamonds, and gold bars. They gave all the stolen goods to Jacques, who then gave them all to Suretha. The criminals chose not to take anything else from the house because they were worried about leaving too much evidence. They were relying solely on the large payment that Suretha had promised. Jacques was not allowed to be present at the crime scene. Suretha was worried that he might be identified on surveillance footage, especially since Toki had seen him several times and knew him as Suretha's friend at school. Jacques was only tasked with transferring the advance payment and instructing his accomplices to carry out the plan. Jacques was so worried about everything that he drove past Leon's house several times to make sure the criminals were ready and Leon was home. Jacques' car was caught on surveillance footage. While the license plate was unclear, the police took note of the car and its identifying features, eventually identifying the owner. Additionally, there was no money in the safe, and all of the family's accounts were frozen during the investigation. Suretha could not pay the hired criminals because selling the stolen goods, such as diamonds, gold bars, or securities, would reveal her involvement. She asked them to be patient, but Enrich and Untold refused and began threatening Jacques. In desperation, Jacques does not receive the money he expected and feels guilty. Untold and Enrich threaten him repeatedly, and he realizes that he faces the possibility of going to prison or suffering the same fate as Leon. He confides in his sister, who speaks to their mother, and together they convince Jacques to turn himself in. They advise him to expose the others involved in the scheme so that he can receive a lighter sentence. Jacques' real motive, in his full confession to the police, was that he believed he had done a noble deed, because he saw Léon as a man who had treated his wife badly, abused her, and threatened to kidnap their children. Suretha reported to the police about the will and property disputes between Léon and Toki. She wanted to imply that Toki was the culprit. However, the police decided to investigate Suretha thoroughly to find out her true intentions. During the investigation, it was discovered that Suretha and Léon had long since fallen out of love and were living apart. Suretha had a lover in Johannesburg, and she wanted to leave Léon to be with him. However, when she asked for a divorce, Léon firmly refused and threatened to take everything from her, including their children. It's difficult to determine Léon's true motivations, but it's likely he still cared for Suretha and wanted to repair their marriage. Meanwhile, Suretha had a plan to inherit his money and business after his death, which would allow her and her lover to live well. She also wants the removal of Toki by setting him up to become a killer, after which she will become the sole owner of the hotel, store, and restaurant after her mother-in-law passes away. Her plan can work if there is money in the safe and if she pays the hired criminals. In the spring of 2021, the trial and sentencing of all involved took place. The court considered each participant's role in this high-profile case. Jacques van Vuren, who collaborated with the prosecution, provided detailed testimony and named his accomplices. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison, eligible for parole after 5 years. The hired criminals, Inrich Williams and Amantal Barecki, were convicted of premeditated murder with added cruelty and robbery. They received life sentences with no chance of parole. Suretha Brits, who planned to kill her husband, convinced the court that she was the victim throughout their relationship. She claimed that Léon forced her to have sex when she was 14. A year later, after she became pregnant, she alleged that Léon forced her to have an abortion late in her pregnancy. Although their love faded, Léon refused to divorce her and threatened to take custody of their children. Suretha was eventually sentenced to 25 years in prison. The court took into account her remorse, her sincere confession, and her role as a mother to 3 young children.